Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday Talks lecture series on socio-political and economic perspectives of the Capability Building on Innovative Leadership for Legislative Staff, or the CIBILS program. Once again, I am Ann Fajardo from the Development Academy of the Philippines, and I'm delighted to usher you to the inaugural lecture of the 2026 CIBILS Thursday Talks. This morning, we have officially opened the 2026 CIBILS program. We have truly been privileged to be gathered in one room with our scholars and distinguished guests from the legislative and executive branch. This afternoon, we sustain that momentum with the first installment of the Thursday Talk series. I hope everyone is looking forward to our first lecture. But before we begin, allow me to recognize the presence of our resource persons. Professor George Tigno from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Department of Political Science. Attorney Maria Antoinette Rivera, Legal Head of the Office of the Chairman of the Commission on Elections. Attorney Ryan J. Rosette, Senior Program Director of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections. And Mr. Jaime Aguilar, the Secretary General of the National Confederation of Transport Workers Union. We are honored to be joined by such an outstanding pool of experts and practitioners. Truly a fitting way to begin this year's activities. So let's get right to it. To give us an overview of what we have in store for this year's lecture series, may I call on the CIBILS Program Manager, Ms. Maria Zarina Crescia de Leon, to deliver this and introduce our esteemed moderator.
Thank you, Anne. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2026 Thursday Talks lecture series. Today, I will provide you with an overview of this year's lecture series. Since 2018, Thursday Talk series has aimed to provide our scholars with broader perspectives on key trends and developments in the socio-political and economic spheres of the country and identify its impacts on governance through a multi-stakeholder dialogue. The interconnected dimensions that define and direct our society consist of a myriad of moving parts, and things are changing faster than we could keep up. Yet, the challenges we face don't seem all that new. We are confronted by international political turmoil, socioeconomic instability, and environmental degradation, and their effects ripple through the state of our nation and the daily lives of the Filipino people. The Philippine government has a responsibility to uphold an efficient, effective, and fair course of action in recognizing and responding to the needs of its citizenry. Its strength, as in any institution, is only as good as its ability to hold its intended form and function. When systems in place fail to address systemic challenges, then they require systemic change. This year's theme, Forging the Future Ahead, Institutional Reforms Amidst the Changing Global Order, underscores the importance of strengthening institutions to enable more responsive, inclusive, and adaptive policymaking, especially in a time marked by geopolitical uncertainty, economic insecurity, and ecological crisis. Ultimately, these reforms aim to better represent the voices of the Filipino people in the policy process. Thursday Talks has remained steadfast in bringing these voices together. For the past 38 installments, it has convened expert thinkers, practitioners, stakeholders, and our dear civil scholars to examine pressing issues and explore actionable solutions. More than a lecture platform, it is a space where ideas take form, where critical conversations spark informed action, and where we, deepen our understanding of the challenges ahead. This year's series will feature 3 lectures, beginning with our inaugural session on representative politics and party list reform. So without further delay, it is my honor to introduce our moderator for the series. Lecture 1 of the 2026 Thursday Talk series will be moderated by Attorney Dana Alberto. Attorney Paula Menjola Alberto graduated from San Beda University College of Law in 2009 and became a member of the bar in 2010. From 2013 to 2017, she was a legislative lawyer in charge of the Senate Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation and the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on the Automated Election System for Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III, who chaired both committees during that time. In 2017, she was appointed to the Secretariat as Legislative Committee Secretary assigned to the Committee on Finance, chaired by Senator Loren Legarda. In 2018, the CERPP and the JCOC-AES, both chaired by Senator Pimentel, were added as her assigned committees. Presently, her committee assignments are CERPP and JCOC-AES, chaired by Senator Risa Ontiveros. Let us all welcome on stage Attorney Dana Alberto.
Thank you, Krisha. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural lecture of Thursday Talks, a lecture series organized by the Development Academy of the Philippines under the Capability Building on Innovative Leadership of Legislative Staff program. Launching into our 2026 series is today's lecture, Reclaiming Representation, a Retrospective on the Philippine party list system towards representative politics. This lecture underscores the importance of genuine representation in democratic societies by re-examining the role of the Philippine party list system in shaping the larger political landscape. To know a bit more about this lecture, let us watch a short video.
Democracies thrive on representation. It should drive how policies are made, whose voices are heard, and how decisions take form. In 1995, the Philippines introduced the party list system, a bold vision to bring marginalized sectors into the halls of power. It was at its core an institutional response to gaps in representation. Over time, however, legal and institutional developments expanded the scope of participation. A seat carved out for the underrepresented has evolved into something far more complex and far more contested. Today, party lists range from advocacy groups, political factions, to extensions of established power. It has become a manifestation of how power is wielded as influence in a theater of norms, where the latter is an enforced picture of how the world has always been. But who benefits? When policies cease to make sense, when voices are silenced, and decisions are self-serving, does the system still serve its original purpose? Or has it taken on a different role within the ever-shifting landscape of Philippine politics? This Thursday, join us as we take a closer look at these questions, looking back at the system's origins and its key turning points, examining its current challenges, and imagining what comes next.
We are currently witnessing a period of significant social, political, and institutional reflection where questions of representation, access, and accountability remain central to democratic governance. In this context, the lecture invites us to revisit the origins and evolution of the party list system. and to critically engage with its role in either advancing or constraining meaningful representation in the Philippines. This lecture aims to surface insights that can help us better understand the challenges and possibilities of building a more inclusive and responsive democratic system. To guide us in this discussion, we are joined by an esteemed panel of experts and practitioners who will share their perspectives on electoral design, political participation, and sectoral representation. To formally begin the session, it is my honor to introduce our distinguished speaker. Our first session examines genuine representation through the Philippine party list system, its origins, design, and evolution. It looks at how the system has shifted from sector-based representation to a broader and contested form of participation, and asks whether it still fulfills its purpose of meaningful representation or if it has diverged from its original intent. For this session, we will be joined by our first speaker. Allow me to introduce him. Professor George Tigno is a Doctor of Public Administration and has been a member of the faculty since 1989. He has undertaken studies on civil society participation and local governance and on electoral and party system reforms in the Philippines, as well as on labor migration from Taiwan and the Philippines, and on migration trends and policies within the ASEAN region. In 2015, he received the NRCP Achievement Award in the Social Sciences. He has published in numerous journals and has co-authored and edited several publications, including an edited book on Philippine political thinkers in the 20th century published by UP Press. Let us welcome to the stage Professor George Tigno.
Thank you, Comsec Dana. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Okay, thank you very much also to DIP CBILS for allowing me this, giving me this opportunity to speak to you on this maybe interesting topic for us at least, for those of you who are working in Congress, but it's also a matter of interest for the general public as well. Can we show the first slide? Yeah. Okay. Medyo binago ko ng bahagya ang title, but it's still the same. Still sends the same message, and this presentation represents my effort to unpack the idea of representation within the specific context of the principles and practice pertaining to the party list system. Pero bago ko pag-usapan ng party list system natin, let me speak to the idea of electoral representation, because this is, I think, the core of the topic. Essentially, when we speak of electoral representation, this is the mechanism or the process through which votes are translated into seats, political seats or representative seats. And in general, we can identify three major categories of electoral systems. First category would be the one that we are most familiar with. This is what we call the single member plurality system, where you have a candidate being elected the winner for having received the most number of votes. So sa ganitong pagkakataon, isa lamang ang pwedeng manalo. In the case of your district representatives, isa lang ang pwedeng manalo per district. And then we have multi-member plurality systems. ang ibig sabihin nito ay the voter gets to select several names from a list, and several winners are proclaimed. Okay. We see this happening every 3 years in the case of our Senate, no? Where voters get to choose up to 12 candidates, no? And 12 candidates are declared winner. It also happens at the local level, yung mga local legislative councils, yung mga sanggunian natin. Multi-member constituencies, no? And then lastly, we have mixed member systems where you have a combination of different types of systems. The House especially represents or illustrates this kind of mixed membership system where you have district representatives and now you have party list representatives. Now, speaking of the party list representatives, can we move to the next slide? The system that we now have in place was conceived at a time when we were transitioning away from an autocratic, authoritarian system towards a more, what we felt at the time, a more genuine type of representation. The 1987 Constitution actually represents what I would call a kind of course correction that recognized the mistakes that we made in putting in place a rather paternalistic, personalistic, centralized, and unaccountable style of government. And so we now shifted away from that towards a more genuinely popular and accountable system of representative government. This is not just like we were not just tinkering with a new system. No? It's actually a direct response to the autocratic system that we had gone through, which I think, we no longer want to return to. No? Now, up to the 1980s, I mean, the idea of a party list system integrated into a multi-member system is not exactly a new thing. Up to the 1980s, there were many countries already that were employing this kind of mixed member proportional, no, or list proportional representation systems, no, but they were mainly in the West, in particular Western Europe, no. So you had countries like Germany, the Benelux countries, Scandinavian countries. But by the late 1980s and into the 1990s, these Western European countries were joined later on by Eastern European countries that used to be run under one-party rule, influenced by the Soviet system. No? But because of the end of the Cold War, they were now transitioning towards a new direction that meant that they needed to adopt a new system of representation. So I'm talking about in countries like Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, among others. No? So by this time, the party list system had caught on, kumbaga, no? Na naging trend na siya. And today, over 150 countries practice the party list system in one form or another. The Philippines is included in that, no? In that group. No? So we were part of that kind of, you might say, democratization wave, no? That tried to establish or institutionalize or foster a more inclusive type of government and governance system that allowed for people who did not have a voice before to have a voice, no, in this new system. But at the time, the framers of the Constitution could only, point us in the general direction, no, of party list. Okay. It was such a new system for the framers of the Constitution that I don't think they were that capable at the time to provide us with specific details as to how we can practice this type of new system of representation. So at the time, they left it for Congress to enact the law that would specify the actual arrangements, no, the specific arrangements, the details. No? So nevertheless, the framers did prescribe, no, that a portion of the seats be allocated in the House, be allocated to party list groups. 20%, no? Alam na natin ito. So there's a specification already in the Constitution of a reserved seat system, no, for the House in particular. Article 6 provides that these party list groups or representatives of these party list groups are elected through a party list system of registered national, regional, and sectoral parties or organizations. No? Nothing else is prescribed. Wala na. No? No minimum threshold, no maximum cap, no proportion of votes. They leave that up for Congress, no, to enact, no, a law. So this reserved seat system in a way also happened in other areas of governance in the Philippines, no? Particularly in local governance. Our local government code, for example, also provides for reserved seats as a matter of principle to NGOs and POs in the local development councils to the tune of, I think, 25%. And this also includes guaranteed seats in the other local special bodies. Next slide. Okay. Now, let's look at the party list system naman, no? Because in 1995, the law happened. No? RA 7941 now makes it possible for the party list provision in the Constitution to actually happen. No? The law provides specifics, okay, how parties can register, the vote threshold that's required, which is 2%, how seats will be allocated, which is a maximum of 3 seats per party list group, and who can participate. Pero if we were to reflect on this, no, kailangan natin sigurong i-process ito ng konti. No? Because, well, it's a pity that Congress at the time did not have mathematicians. No? Because if you look at the formula, no, you have a constitution that allocates 20% of the seats in the House to party list groups. No? So they can be anywhere from 52, 55 to, I think, around 60 yata, no, in 2025. And then you have a party list law that specifies a minimum threshold of 2% of the votes cast in the party list elections in order to qualify for a seat. But it also imposes a cap of 3 seats per party list, regardless of the percentage of votes beyond 2%. I've been saying this ever since, that this is a mathematical impossibility. Okay. It's like you're saying, siguro naririnig natin ito, naranasan natin ito, no? Where you hear a dispatcher of jeepneys, no? or a bus dispatcher saying, okay, pabiyahe na ito, X number of seats na lang ang kailangan, no? 10 seats remaining, and so you have to, you have to take the ride, otherwise you have to wait for the next jeep, no? And then along comes a group of 10 that will actually fill up the 10 remaining seats. Tapos sasabihin ng dispatcher, how many are you in the group? We're 10. Hindi kayo lahat pwedeng makasakay. Only 3 can ride the jeepney, even though there are 10 seats available. Okay. So that's what I mean when it's mathematically impossible with the cap in place. It's not proportional. This formula is simply not proportional. And this mathematical flaw actually has led to unfilled seats for party list representatives. Let me put it another way. So you are 10 in the group, sasabihin ng dispatcher, magkakasama kayo. Yes, but only 3 of you can ride. No? The rest of you will have to look for another way to ride. No? But that group of 10 can just divide themselves into maybe 3 or 4 groups. No? So pag tinanong ng dispatcher, yung first 3, okay, magkakakilala kayo, kilala nyo ba yung next 7? Sasabihin nila, hindi, even though they are all part of the same group. Diba? So this leads actually to fragmentation. Fragmentation of organizations, fragmentation of parties. Because some parties are likely to receive too many what might be called overhang, no? Sobra sa boto, more than the 3-seat limit that the law mandates. No? And this leads to a lot of wasted votes and actually encourages greater fragmentation rather than consolidation. So if you have 2%, you get 1 seat. You get 4%, you get 2 seats. You get 6%, you get 3 seats. You get 10% of the votes, you still get 3 seats. No? Parang pinipigilan natin ang mga kinatawan natin na maging boses, no, ng taong bayan. So in 1998, only 14 party list representatives, about 14, were able to fill up the 52 seats that were allocated to them. So, ang daming vacancies. The Supreme Court, I think, at some point intervened and applied a certain formula that basically uses the same formula as the original law. You know, the 2% rule is left untouched, and the 3-seat cap is left untouched. It still left a lot of seats vacant. Out of 55 vacancies, only 13 were eventually occupied. So it's one thing to encourage different groups, no, to participate in our legislative process, but it's another thing also to find that the law itself acts as its own gatekeeper for those who wish to participate. Pero hindi pa tapos ang istorya, no? Can we move to the... Oh, wait, sorry. Can you go back to the previous one? I think this is... No, next one. Yan, okay. I don't know if you can still see the very bottom. All is not lost, no? Because now we have the Supreme Court to act on this matter, on this problem, no? That we can't seem to fill up the vacancies, no? Reserved for party list representatives. The number of vacancies were found to be actually increasing from 38 in 1998 to about 42 by 2007. This prompted a group, the Barangay Association for National Advancement and Transparency, called BANAT. So binanatan ng BANAT ang problem na ito, and they filed the case in the Supreme Court about 2007 yata. And in 2009, the Supreme Court issued a decision that basically modified the party list law. The 2% threshold still exists, but its role now has been altered a bit because of another rule that the court had instituted. It's called the remainder rule. The 2% threshold is now used to guarantee one seat. Okay, but parties that fall below that threshold can still win a seat through the remainder rule specified in the decision. So, parties, yun nga, like I said, parties that receive at least 2% of the total votes, they're now entitled to one seat each. No? And depending on how big their percentage vote share is from 2%, then they will get additional seats, but only up to 3. Okay? So that still leaves you with a lot of overhang, not overhang, yung vacancies. No? Now, the Supreme Court has decided that those vacancies can now be filled up by party list groups that have received a vote share less than 2%. And so the counting now, instead of going up, is now pababa, no? Pababa from 2%. No? So even if a party were to, definitely if you get 2% of the votes and above, you're good, no? But even if you did not manage to acquire 2% of the votes, you can still have a chance to get at least one seat until all the vacancies are filled up. No? So this new formula makes it possible to prioritize. I think the reason why the Supreme Court came out with this decision is their priority is the constitutional provision, okay, which is to fill up the 20% reserved seats. Okay. So yun dapat ang rather than leave many of them vacant. Okay. So that's the good news. But I don't know if it's really that bad, no? But it's unfortunate that the decision also allows groups to obtain seats even when the proportion of the votes they received is less than 2%. Much, much less, actually. So crossing the 2% threshold is good, but it's not the end of the world for your party if your group got less than 2%. You're not automatically disqualified, as was the case, I think, in previous iterations, no, of the party list law. Okay, so to give you an idea of how low the counting can go, in 2025, okay, out of 41.6 million votes cast for party list, only about 6. No, I may be wrong with the exact figures here. No? About 6 out of 150 party list groups that took part in the elections met that 2% threshold. So sila lang talaga ang nakalampas, no? But it just so happens that 48 party list representatives still got in even when they received less than 2% of the votes. So meron kang na-meet yung threshold, meron kang sub-threshold winners, like the group that got 1.86% of the votes, 1.83, 1.38%. This is less than 2%. And then there are the sub-threshold, no? The bottom ranking ones, from 33 to 54. Okay. And they got, their percentage votes were 0.64. So almost nearly 0.5%, no? 0.62% of the vote share. This is definitely not proportional because, 0.62 of 54 is not 1. It's 0.3. Okay, less than half of 1. Okay, and if you put that in practical terms, actually, less than, half, no? Half of the winning party list representatives, party list groups, received less than 400,000 votes. Okay, and 8 of the winning party list representatives received less than 300,000 votes. So, I don't know, is that how easy it is to get a seat in the House as a party list representative? Another thing also that came out of this arrangement, this new arrangement, no, is that we're seeing a new tactic evolving. No? And this tactic has to do with disqualifying a party list that is in the top tier, especially those that received 2% minimum of the votes, no? Because that will give those at the bottom a greater chance of landing at least one seat as the list moves up, di ba? Dahil nagtanggal, halimbawa, no? Halimbawa lang, the Duterte youth gets disqualified, and so the percentage now will move up down the line. Everyone gets to move up the line. Okay, depending, of course, on your voter share. But even if you get a vote share of less than 2%, you still have a chance of landing a seat in the House. And for additional perspective, out of roughly 1,500 municipalities, 1,300 fall below 50% registered voters. So you have more than 1,000 municipalities with less than 50,000 registered voters. And only 106 cities and municipalities exceed 100,000 registered voters. Bigyan ko lang kayo ng idea, no? Kung anong equivalent nung 0.62%. 0.62% of the votes is roughly equivalent to 261,000. So all you need is maybe a province or a group of municipalities combined, and you can meet this percentage and land at least one seat in the House as a party list representative. There are some districts in the country, actually, that have less registered voters. No? Sabihin ko na, Dinagat Island has 81,000 registered voters. And I think it's one district. Quirino has 117,000 registered voters. Biliran has 124. No? So it's a matter of getting, bits and pieces of local constituencies, and you're good to have at least one representative in the House as a party list representative. Next slide. Okay, but here comes to the rescue again the Supreme Court. Okay, the Constitution envisioned a party list system primarily giving a voice to marginalized and underrepresented groups, sort of giving them the privilege of having a voice in the House at least. And this point was affirmed in 2001 when the court ruled that party list groups are required to represent sectors like labor, peasants, urban poor, indigenous communities, veterans, and overseas workers. But in 2013, the same court ruled to remove the limitation of party list groups to represent only the marginalized and underrepresented sectors. And so the ruling removed the need for party list groups to have to represent a well-defined constituency. It's no longer a requirement. Okay? Turning the party list system into an open political terrain for anyone to enter. In the beginning, what COMELEC tried to do, because there were so many, party list groups that wanted to join the elections, in the beginning, they arranged them alphabetically. No? So yung mga pangalan ng mga party list groups had to start with an A. Diba? A teacher, ACT, CIS, and so on. To for them to land in the first page at least of the ballot, first few lines of the ballot, anticipating that voters are going to be tired of looking through the rest of the list. So dun lang sila titingin sa ibabaw. But some party list groups try to circumvent this, and instead of starting with an A, they would start with the number 1. 1 utak, 1 pacman, para mauna sila. But, of course, the COMELEC got wise to this scheme, and they just raffled off they distributed the numbers randomly to the different party groups. Now, you have different groups that sound more like slogans, but are largely programmatically empty. Sabihin ko na, Bagong Pilipinas. Tutok to win. Wow, Pilipinas. Okay. Agimat. Pamilya ko. Ako, Bicol. Ano ngayon? Diba? Hindi nyo na alam kung ano yung gusto nilang sabihin sa atin. And there's this group na ang matay alagaan. I didn't know there was this amang, ang matay alagaan, ayuda, MOCA, Mothers of Change, and BPO, Bangon Philippine Outsourcing. There's even Turismo, Wi-Fi, Click Party, BFF, Batang Quiapo, TikTok, we had in 2025 no less than 155 party lists. And according to studies that have been done, about half of the party list representatives in the current Congress are said to come from political clans, political families, even though the parties they nominally represent, claim to represent the poor, the workers, the farmers, mothers, women, the elderly, etc. So it has become simply a matter of a formality to have to constitute a party list and to participate and to even win a seat at least in the House. Next slide. Okay, so how does the Philippines compare with other countries? Okay. In general, the Philippines follows this mixed membership system, where voters get two ballots. One is for the district representative and yung pangalawa ay dun sa mga party list representative. And they are counted separately or independently. The spirit actually of a mixed system is that it should compensate for the weakness of each other's weakness. One tier, one form of representation should compensate for the weakness of the other. District representatives are not proportional. Okay? Siyempre, isa lang, single member constituency lang siya. So no matter how big the vote share of the district rep or the candidate gets, it's still one person who gets to sit as district representative. The party list system or the party list tier is meant to complement that. So yung hindi na sasakop ng distrito ay ideally pwedeng masakop in principle ng mga party list representatives natin, because they are elected in principle proportionally. But the way that the Philippine style of the party list, in the way that it imposes a 3-seat cap, okay, this is not proportional. And I would argue that it is the only one of its kind in the world. Because no matter how many votes you get as a party list, you will not get any increase in the seats that you can occupy beyond 3. So, regardless of your vote share. Now, in other countries, they have what's known as the Mixed Member Proportional System, MMP. And the countries that employ this kind of system include Germany and New Zealand. New Zealand's system, pareho din lang sa atin. Each voter gets to make 2 votes. One for the party and one for the electorate. Parang equivalent ng district vote natin. The party vote largely decides the number of seats a political party gets. Okay? So it's proportional. When a party wins a bigger share of the party vote, it gets more seats in the parliament. Ito naman talaga ang kahulugan ng proportionality. A candidate who wins in the electorate, the district, gets only 1 seat in parliament, regardless of the proportion. So it's not proportional, like in the Philippines. But the thing is, the remaining seats, okay, if there are any vacancies, they are filled up by party list groups, depending on the percentage. But may condition, okay? either one of two conditions, no? Either the party list received at least 5%, not 2%, but 5%. Or the same party gets at least one electoral seat. No, so magkadugtong, linked actually ang tawag nila. Linked ang party list election sa district elections nila. In our case, parang de-linked siya, no? Hindi malinaw yung pagkakaugnay. So, if a party wins 40% of the party vote, let me see, their parliament is made up of 120 seats, okay? So, if you get 40% of the party vote, then you're entitled to 48 seats. But, kung nanalo ka ng 30 district seats, that means 18 na lang na party list ang maibibigay mo, no? Because you would have had 48 seats in total, include party list and district seats. This is what I mean by being linked together, no? So the party list seats are meant to top up, to supplement kung ano yung kulang sa sa electoral seats, no? But of course you have to meet the threshold, which is 5%. Okay. Let's see. I'm running out of time. Now let's look at the pure party list. Pure party list proportional representation. In this case, like in the Netherlands, the entire country is one district. So, wala silang district reps, no? Their parliament is made up entirely of party list representatives. So, voters get only one ballot, no? They get to choose from a party list, a list of parties, no? So the number of seats that they have is 150. 100% of that is reserved, is actually for for party list representatives. But the thing is, I'm not sure if they really have a threshold, no? Or the threshold is very low, like ours, no? Kasi in one election yata, one party list group got less than 1%, 0.67%. But it's different from ours because in our case, we have a 3-seat cap. Sa kanila, wala. Fully proportional, no? So, 0.67% of 150 is roughly about 1 seat, no? So, you get 1 seat as a proportion of the total number of votes. And there is no limit on the number of seats that a party can win. Walang cap. Walang ceiling. No? You can get 100, all 150 seats, no? If you are able to get that many votes. And then we have what are known as MMM countries. Mixed member majoritarian, no? Where in the case of Japan, the voters also cast 2 ballots, no? One for the district, one for party list. But there is a unique peculiarity here, no? In the case of Japan, they have 500 seats in their legislature, and 200 are reserved for party list groups, proportional, no? Based on their vote share. And I think yata ngayon binawasan na nila yung total number of seats na yan, but roughly 500. A unique feature of the Japanese system is that it allows dual candidacy. So you can run as a district rep and a nominee in the party list. Okay? So kung hindi ka nanalo as a district rep, there could still be a chance that you might win as a nominee in the party list election. Yun ang tawag nilang zombie. No? Kasi patay ka na dapat pero nabuhay ka pa, no? Through the party list system. But their system is also quite restrictive, no? Because yung condition nito, in order to be able to field candidates on the party list and in district seats, a party needs to either have 5 or more diet members. So dapat nananalo ka na, may track record ka na may naipanalo ka na ang partido mo at least 5 diet members. Or the equivalent of 1 diet member and 2% of the nationwide vote of party list, for party list. So it's either or, no? So they look at election performance, no? So the history of the party, the performance history of the party. So it's less about clearing a vote percentage on election day itself, because your name may not be qualified to be on the ballot kung hindi ka naman, kung wala namang naipapanalo ang iyong partido in the past. There's also an additional rule for dual candidates, no? If a dual candidate, you're running district tsaka PR, party list PL, wins less than 10% of the vote in their single member constituency. So if you run for district rep and you only got less than 10% of the vote, you are no longer qualified for party list. So maaring hindi ka nanalo, no? But if hindi ka nga nanalo pero you only got less than 5% lang of the vote, for example, you cannot be in the party list as a candidate. You're disqualified. So you have to have some showing, something to show as a district. Even though you may have lost maybe, but you got 20% of the votes, then you can qualify as a party list representative. Last or second to the last slide na lang siguro. Sunod na. Lessons for the Philippines. Okay. I can see 3 structural problems here. One is, for the Philippines at least, no? One is the 2% floor, which is actually now functionally gone, no? Experience shows that a minimum threshold is still necessary. And I think probably needs to be raised rather than rendered moot, no, in this case. A near zero effective threshold lets the smallest, the weirdest, the most vested interests in the House. No? Second problem, or second structural problem, is the 3-seat cap. It invites fragmentation. It discourages consolidation. It makes proportionality impossible. If you're going to put a threshold there or lower it, then the cap should be removed altogether, in which case you're now creating a genuinely proportional system. Third structural problem, I call, saan ba yun? Oh no, this is not the last one. Can you move the slide, please? Yeah, okay. The third structural problem is what I call closed but personal. The Philippines officially follows a closed system, no? Meaning to say it's the party list that identifies its nominees. No? In actual practice, however, it's still personality-oriented. What we have is a party list system that is highly personality-oriented, candidate-centered. And this allows for parties to be created around, allows the individual to create a party rather than the other way around. rather than the party creating or molding the individual. As long as you have a popular surname, as long as you have the connections, then you can put up your own party list, and earn a seat in the House, maybe along with your relatives. In aiming for morally upright and capable individuals, I mean, one can also cite the case of Thailand, no? Because, I mean, in Thailand, they also have a similar proportional system, but the problem there now is that it's that the Thai party lists are slowly being dominated by political families also. No? So I think we need to also take into account the structural aspects, no, of our system and how this system can address the problems that we are facing. What's this? Okay. I guess that's it. Maybe we can discuss this further during the Q&A at saka during sa panel discussion, but that's it for now. Maraming salamat po. Yeah, I think you? Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Tigno, for the thought-provoking lecture. The challenges and gaps pertaining to the quality of representation is indeed evident in the kind of system that we have, and it speaks volumes in terms of its effects on the country's political landscape. Truly, there is a need for a more critical reflection of the roles and responsibilities of representatives who must remain accountable to their constituents in creating responsive, purposive, and adaptive policies in their interests. Once again, let us give Professor Tigno another round of applause. A few reminders before we proceed. For our Facebook Live participants, you may post your questions in the comments section. Our CIBO staff will consolidate these for the open forum. For those on site and watching via Zoom, a QR code will be shared shortly where you can submit your questions. We will now take a short break before we begin the panel discussion. Thank you.
We kindly request everyone to please go back to their seats as we will begin our next session in a moment. We also invite our panel discussants to come up on stage.
Welcome back, everyone. Please take your seats. In the previous session, we have traced the broader discussion on representation and the Philippine party list system. We now turn to our distinguished panel of practitioners and experts who will share their insights about political representation and how this system, by design and in practice, continually transforms democratic institutions. With that, allow me the honor of introducing our panel discussants. Our first discussant is Attorney Maria Antoinette Rivera. She is currently serving as Attorney 6 and Legal Head at the Office of the Chairman of the Commission on Elections. In this role, she supports Chairman George Erwin M. Garcia in advancing policy development and legislative research initiatives focused on electoral reform, as well as promoting more inclusive, accessible, and effective voter education. She began her legal career at COMELEC as Executive Assistant 5 to then Commissioner Antonio Tico Jr., where she was involved in the office's adjudicatory functions and gained valuable experience in election law and dispute resolution. May we give her a round of applause. Our second discussant is Attorney Ryan J. Rosette, currently the Senior Program Director of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections. He handles litigation and the abuse of state resources in elections project of the organization. Currently, he also serves as the Coordinator for Direct Legal Service of the Legal Rights and Natural Resources Center and an instructor at the De La Salle University, Manila, teaching legal management subjects. May we give Attorney Rosette a round of applause. Last but not the least, we also have Mr. Jaime Aguilar, the Secretary General of the National Confederation of Transport Workers Union, and a dedicated labor organizer in the transport sector. He has been actively involved in grassroots organizing, working closely with transport workers and unions to strengthen collective action and advance workers' rights. His years of experience with sectoral community organizing translates to his involvement in the education and training of members and leaders on organizational development, leadership, organizing, participatory community planning and budgeting, alliance, and coalition work. Let us give him a round of applause. And of course, still with us is Professor Tigno. Let's give our panelists a warm round of applause. To further ground our discussion in the Philippine socio-political context, I would like to invite each of our panelists to come to the podium as you are called to share a brief opening statement focusing on what meaningful representation looks like for Filipinos today. Let's begin with Attorney Rivera.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I am Attorney Maria Antoinette Rivera. I appear today on behalf of my boss, Chairman George Erwin Garcia, and by extension, the Commission on Elections. First, I want to start by thanking the Civils and the Development Academy of the Philippines teams for the opportunity to be part of this discourse. I hope that what we offer today, which is based on the Commission's institutional experience in administering the party-list system, will add something meaningful to the conversation. Actually, Chairman Garcia's legislative and policy reform is a defining commitment in his tenure. Among his primary reform initiatives are the Anti-Political Dynasty Act and the Party List Reform Act. These are the two measures which he thinks are foundational to any serious effort to reorient Philippine democracy towards genuine representation. It is in that spirit that we share our experiences today. We want to inform everyone that we have gone as far as submitting our own complete proposed bill to the Senate for consideration. The question that was asked out everyone in the panel today is, what does meaningful representation look like for Filipinos in today's social political landscape? This is not an abstract question. It's an important and practical one. It is a question that the Commission is always confronted, not just when we canvass the votes of party lists, but also as early as during the registration process. Ultimately, party list registration dictates which voices, which sectors, and which communities are actually able to seek seats in the House of Representatives. We know that the party list system was born of a particular aspiration. As earlier mentioned, in crafting the 1987 Constitution, the framers understood that democracy anchored solely on geographical districts would inevitably replicate the same concentration of power as our authoritarian past. The party list system then was, as correctly described, a course correction. It provided a constitutional guarantee designed to ensure that farmers, fisherfolk, laborers, and others long excluded from power would have a guaranteed seat in the legislative table. However, that design was based on a premise, and it was an optimistic premise. It was built on the assumption that for the first 3 consecutive terms after the ratification of the Constitution, those same sectors would gain enough strength such that their organizations will take root, will develop their constituencies, and they will be able to compete on their own strength in a fully open proportional system. After that transitional window of 9 years, the Supreme Court in Atong Paglaom versus Comelec confirmed that the exclusive reservation of seats for marginalized sectors no longer apply. It is no longer constitutionally compelled. Proportional representation, the Supreme Court said, was the design and was the governing principle. So the system would be open to national and regional political parties and organizations, whether or not they serve the marginalized. We note that there is wisdom in that design. The party list system has always been meant to serve a dual purpose. First, it was to guarantee a voice for the marginalized, but also to provide a pathway for political parties that while unable to secure a legislative seat through legislative district, nonetheless carry a coherent political position and genuine support. Some political parties cannot win a district seat, but that does not mean that they are a weak party. It may simply be that their support is distributed broadly, but thinly across the country. So if the system is exclusively district-based, it would render them invisible, allowing weaker, so-called weaker political parties to compete for party list seats is how a democratic system avoids becoming concentrated by the geographically entrenched politicians. I know everyone here can see that the recent elections is proof of this concept. We've seen some political parties who participate in the party list system gain multiple seats for party lists, even though they are not part of a stronger national political party coalition. So after the 3 terms, it was assumed that the sectors would be strong enough to stand on their own alongside these political parties and even national political parties. But 37 years have passed since then. It is high time for us to ask honestly if that assumption was correct, and if it was not correct or not consistently correct, what should we do about it? Perhaps the most direct way for me to answer that question would be to describe the proposed bill that the COMELEC has submitted to the Senate, which, among others, embody the structural and procedural changes we hope to implement. Before that, though, I have to summarize some of the current weaknesses or shortcomings of the present law. To speak very plainly, we received a lot of criticisms from stakeholders that encompass structural, legal, and moral issues. For instance, as was exhaustively discussed earlier, RA 7941 actually imposed a 2% minimum threshold, which proved to be a mathematical impossibility if combined with the 3-cap rule. So before Banat, in fact, Veterans Foundation, the case of Veterans Federation versus COMELEC, the Supreme Court actually said that the 20% was a ceiling and not a mandatory requirement. So there were less than 20% party lists sitting in Congress at any given time because they were unable to meet the 2% requirement. However, the Supreme Court stepped up. In Banat, they reversed the earlier ruling in Veterans. They said that the 20% limit is mandatory. At any given time, 20% of the House of Representative members must be composed of party lists. And so they had to change the formula. So from imposing a fixed 2% threshold requirement, they prioritized following the constitutional mandate of 20% membership, and they implemented a couple of different formulations. It was described earlier as having a system of threshold winners, sub-threshold winners, and then the remainder rule. However, for lawyers here, we all know that with each round of jurisprudence, there's an additional layer of complexity. In fact, as late as now, as most recent as the 2025 elections, we still receive a lot of challenges in the Commission on Elections as well as in the Supreme Court as to the correctness of the formulation. So it is not impossible that that formulation can also be judicially changed in the future. But that is a problem. That's a big problem, actually. Judicial intervention, however well-intentioned, cannot substitute for deliberate legislative design. When the rules of representation are shaped primarily by shifting jurisprudence rather than by clear statutory policy, 3 things are compromised. First, predictability for the participating parties and organizations. Second, consistency in how the COMELEC applies the rules. And third, and most critically perhaps, how the public sees the system, whether or not it's reflective of a coherent policy. We also witnessed, and this is something I want to bring up, that in the absence of clear statutory boundaries, there's a lot of mix-up in the membership of the party lists. Right now, before any delisting, there are currently 195 party list organizations. Out of that number, I think roughly 83 to 87 represent political parties. And from the remaining, only 33 party lists actually represent one of the 8 sectors that were written in the Constitution. The remaining 60 plus represent a variety of different sectors, not necessarily marginalized because of the Atong Paglaom ruling. That number should give us pause because quantity is not always the same as quality. The common criticism or feedback that we receive from civil society organizations, the academic observers, and from the general public is that without a more rigorous statutory standard for accreditation, nomination, and continued registration, the system risks becoming a wide door through which a lot of organizations enter, but through which genuine sectoral voices do not necessarily emerge. So with that in mind, the Commission Elections has put forward the proposed bill, and the parameters for what reforms must be made are as follows. First, we think that representation must be genuine in the truest sense of the word. What does that mean? With all due respect to the Supreme Court's ruling in Atong Paglaom, we think the most fundamental reform is also the most straightforward. Nominees of sectoral parties or organizations must personally belong to that sector. Right now, the parameter is that even an advocate can be the nominee. We think that representatives must not merely share beliefs. They must not simply advocate for the cause. They must belong to the communities. A nominee for the labor sector must be a worker. A nominee for the indigenous communities should come from those communities as well. Because the lived experience of marginalization is not a credential that should be ignored or can be passed to an advocate. Congress then must enshrine this standard in statute and make it a firm condition for accreditation. Second, the allocation of seats, the manner of allocation of seats must reflect deliberate legislative choice. There must be no room for interpretation and no room for judicial intervention. The Commission recommends that a structured seat allocation be in place. So if there are 100% seats in the party lists, we want 20% to be reserved to political parties who participate in the party list, and then 70% to be allocated to a specified list of sectors, including laborers, peasants, fisher folk, women, youth, veterans, among others. And then a remaining 10% allocation should be a limited catch-all for other demonstrably marginalized sectors not otherwise enumerated. For instance, persons deprived of liberty, internally displaced peoples can also be part of this 10% catch-all sector. This framework will give sectors a guaranteed stake. It does not allow political organizations with more resources to crowd out the grassroots, and it creates a predictability that sound administration demands. The Supreme Court is right that there is a 20% ceiling in the party list participation. But what happens within that ceiling, we believe, is properly a matter of legislation. Third, the parameters for qualification must be set by legislation so that the Commission can make that process rigorous without being prone to judicial challenges. The Commission recommends that Congress establish clear and definitive criteria for accreditation, which includes 1-year membership for nominees, strict anti-dynasty and conflict of interest provisions, which would disqualify those who are related within a certain degree of consanguinity or affinity to incumbent officials, and those who hold or benefit from government contracts from also participating in the party list system. These are safeguards that distinguish a genuine sectoral representative from a placeholder for political interests. Fourth, the system must create space for parties to grow, but not to exist indefinitely. The Commission recommends replacing the current rule on cancellation of registration. Before 2009, the Commission was able to cancel the registration of a party list that fails to participate or fails to win for the two preceding elections. That means if party list loses in 2025 and did not participate in 2022, we are able to cancel that registration. However, in the case of the Philippine Guardians Brotherhood Inc. versus COMELEC in 2009, the Supreme Court actually overturned the earlier decision in Minero versus COMELEC. They said that those two requirements are distinct, meaning a party list must either successively fail to participate or successively fail to qualify. What does the parties do? The parties just merely skip the next elections to remain in the roster. Sophisticated actors have learned to game the system by skipping alternative elections. This should be replaced with a rule that counts any two failures, whether or not by failing to participate or by failing to obtain the necessary votes, as a ground for cancellation. A party that cannot sustain electoral relevance should be removed from the list of party lists. The framers of the 1987 Constitution imagined the House of Representatives where the farmer, the fisher, the laborer, and the urban poor would sit side by side with the district representative as equal legislators with guaranteed standing and a genuine mandate from the people. While we respect the Supreme Court decision on this matter, we think that guaranteed seats for sectors would allow the party list system to do what it was always intended to do. The reform measures that are now before the Senate is what we think represents the most serious legislative effort in a generation to make good on this constitutional promise. We don't delude ourselves that this bill will remove all of the problems inherent in the party list system, but it will certainly remove the most critical ones. Meaningful representation for Filipino, to answer the question posed today, looks like a system where the marginalized are truly present to challenge the status quo, to make legislative deliberations more rich with the experience and the struggles of the common Filipino. That is the standard and the vision that the COMELEC commits to, and that is the standard we urge the Congress to codify into law. We hope that our colleagues here today can put forward the same vision in your respective offices and principles. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Attorney Rivera. Next, may we hear from Attorney Rosette.
Good afternoon, everyone, and maraming salamat sa pagkakataon na ito. Okay. So what does meaningful representation look like for Filipinos in today's socio-political landscape? No? Meaningful representation means accountable, competitive, and empowered representation, where the voices of the marginalized are really heard, where there is no domination of elites, where policies are geared towards social justice, and where governance is not politicized. So when we say governance is not politicized, it's governance that is hindi kumbaga unbiased, hindi siya mendicant form, no? When I say mendicant form of governance, it's kasi sa Pilipinas meron kang industriya ng intermediaries na even if you qualify for example particular benefit, you need an intermediary, no, to grant you that benefit, and it's a whole industry, no, and that actually reinforces yung lack of meaningful representation. Kasi when you say representation, it is actually the power coming from the bottom. Na someone in position actually represents your needs. But not someone in position dictating whether you are qualified for that particular need. Now, accountability, of course, has various aspects. In the context of elections, accountability takes the form of being able to deliver campaign promises and being able to remove people who are not performing well. Because when you're talking about elections, it's a form of, political accountability. Ayaw na namin sa'yo. So kung ayaw namin sa'yo, pwede ka namin tanggalin during the next elections. Or even before the next elections, kung ayaw talaga namin sa'yo. No? Now, this entails the meaningful exercise of the right of suffrage that goes beyond personality-based spectacle that the Philippines has now. And the ability to make genuine and meaningful choices. Inextricably linked to accountability is electoral competitiveness, which is shaped by the people's choice-making in the context of the political and social ecosystem. Now, when you're going to take a look at the Philippine Constitution, especially the provision on party list, electoral competitiveness was actually implied in the Philippine Constitution itself. Why? That's why, kasi nakalagay nga doon, meron kang transitory period. And that transitory period was a recognition that the party list system, hindi competitive. And pamaraan yung party list system sana na lumaki yung mga maliliit na sektor para they can participate in bigger electoral competitions. But of course, we all know that the point, that transitory period was not enough to nurture an environment wherein the party list can be more competitive. To nurture an environment wherein the party list na mapalakas siya. No? Now, the ecosystem is shaped by formal law. No? The formal law itself, as defined under the Constitution, and RA 7941, which is the party list law, other policies. No? Of course, when you're talking about policies affecting the party list system, hindi lang naman ito yung konstitusyon tsaka yung party list law. There are other policies which affect it. And apart from that, and very important as well, which I think hindi nabibigyan ng pansin, is actually the electoral culture. No? Yung electoral culture sa Pilipinas na which affects how the formal law is actually implemented. So translated into its practical effects, most reforms focus on improving the electoral choices without really focusing on how the choice is actually made by the voter. In other words, as I mentioned, top-down reform. If only by way of illustration, party list elections often involve the following problems. So una, meron kang low voter turnout. No? So yung kalimitahan ng awareness ng voter. No? So hindi alam ng voter yung ano ba yung kahalagahan ng party list system sa kanila. No? And in fact, hindi lang party list system, even the electoral system. A lot of Filipinos, when they think about democracy, they stop with elections itself. So when they vote, that's democracy. And that's about it. And that has ramifications insofar as how democracy is actually lived in practice in the Philippines. So now, you're going back to the party list system. So first, of course, you have low voter awareness. So ano ba yung relevance ng party list sa akin? At pangalawa, undervoting. Due to the complexity of the ballot, ang dami sa listahan ng balota. Yung mga tao, hindi na nga nila alam kung ano ba yung kahalagahan ng party list system sa kanila on a personal level and how their vote actually relates to it. But at the same time, sobrang cumbersome nung dami. Nung dami na pwede mong ibotohin na party list. Now, of course, there are ways to actually address this. No, among the top-down reforms is actually to limit the choices. So, how do you limit the choices? More stringent requirements insofar as sino ba yung pwedeng party list na magka-qualify. Pangalawa, and this was mentioned earlier, no, yung nominees should be members of the sector. Of course, apart from that is the anti-dynasty provision. Because again, as we all know, and the party list is actually being hijacked. No? Kumaga backdoor siya. Actually, ano nga yung backdoor siya for political dynasties. Tapos, of course, members should be members of the marginalized sector. Now, apart from this, no, yung purely geographic appreciation of the party list should be abandoned. No? So, for example, regional. Why? Of course, we are very much aware of the Supreme Court decision, di ba? Kasi nakalagay sa Constitution, merong regional. No? But yung geographic appreciation of the party list, dapat i-abandon siya. Why? Kasi if you already have a representative, no, dun sa distrito mo, why do you need another one? So it goes against the principle of, republicanism in a sense. Because if you already have a certain number of portion of the population having a representative, having a voice in Congress, dadagdagan mo pa, no? No. Now, and again, this was also mentioned a while ago, do away with the seat cap to incentivize, yung parties to aggregate. And then yung mandatory threshold insofar as the sectors are concerned. And really, the purpose is to make the sectors competitive, allow them to develop. Now, apart from these reforms, yung top-down reforms, it's important to educate the people about the political system, the party list system, and democracy itself. No? And it's something that we believe sa Lente, meron ding talagang kakulangan. No? If you ask the ordinary Filipino, ano ba yung kahalagahan ng demokrasya sa kanila? Basta bumoto sila. And then when they elect a person in power, they treat them as kings. And that's why even the how governance, no, is actually implemented, especially dun sa ating mga probinsya, no, ay ganun, no, very centralized yung authority figure, no, at yung to be able to access resources, it's a very personality and personal based. Kung meron kang connection, no. Now, in order for democracy to work, it should be neutral. It should be impersonal, no. And it's something that we believe sa Lente ay dapat mabigyan din ng pansin. So, yun lang pa.
Thank you, Attorney Rosette. Finally, central to our discussion are perspectives from the grassroots and sectoral stakeholders. We're privileged to have with us Mr. Jaime Aguilar. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Medyo marami na pong napag-usapan. Ano po. Kami po damang-dama namin yung problema natin talaga sa party list system. Kasi kita nyo naman yung pagsirit ngayon ng oil price. Wala po kaming tagapagsalita talaga na purong transport na para may paliwanag yung aming saloobin. At nakikita po natin ng ating gobyerno parang walang krisis, no, kung umaksyon. Doon po kami nasasaktan ng lubusan. Kaya para po sa amin, nagpapasalamat po kami sa civils at muli ay na-invite po tayo para mag-share bilang pananaw po ng mga manggagawa sa transportasyon regarding dito sa usapin na to na tingin namin ay dalawa nga po, no? Yung anti-dynasty at saka party list law. magkapatid na magkapatid po yan, ano? Related na related. Kasi alam niyo naman, nag-extend po yung ating mga political dynasty hanggang party list. Yun po yung ating basic problem. Po, para sa amin po, no, hindi po tayo magsisimula sa Congress agad. No, yung representation na tinatanong nga po natin, no, to reclaim. Kami nga po ay sinasabi nga po natin dito na para sa amin, ano ba yung meaningful representation? Para sa amin ay, ang mga manggagawa po ay araw-araw bumabangon. Sabi nga po rito, hindi sigurado if today's income will be enough to live. No? Dahil sa maraming krisis na dinaranas ng mga driver at operator po. I think fellow transport workers who keep our cities moving every day yet remain unheard in the decision that shape our lives. Kita po natin yan, maasa po yung mga transport workers, maraming mga pangako yung gobyerno, darating yung ayuda, hanggang ngayon po ay struggles pa rin po tayo. Kaya yan po yung araw-araw na nangyayari. From where I stand, meaningful representation is not symbolic. No? It must be material, participatory, and transformative. For me, it is material because representation should bring real change to our daily conditions. I have seen how policies like the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program are presented as solutions. But without enough subsidy, without enough accessible financing, and without real consultation, modernization feels less like progress and more like a displacement, a job displacement. I believe representation must ensure that no transport worker loses their livelihood in the name of the development. It is participatory because I do not want to be treated as a passive recipient of policy. I want to be part of shaping it. For too long, decisions about routes, fares, and our future have been made without us. The party system was supposed to change that. Yun po yung inaasahan natin na magkaroon talaga ng representation yung mga sektor. To give sectors like ours a voice in the Congress, but I have to ask, are we truly being represented today? It is transformative because what we face is not just a transport issue, it is a broader crisis of inequality. When all prices go up, nararamdaman po agad namin yan. Meron po talagang tama sa aming kabuhayan. But I also see how it affects everyone else. Fare increases, workers struggle to get to their jobs, and the cost of goods rises. The transport sector is at the center of this domino effect in our economy. Alam na alam po natin yan. At ramdam na po ngayon yan. Nagkukulang na po yung supplies ng ating public transport. 25% na lamang po ang tumatakbo doon sa mga nag-modernize. No? At lubog na sa utang yung ating mga kooperatiba. Pero yung tulong ng gobyerno ay hinahanap pa rin po natin. Pero marami naman pong announcement. Maraming pangako. That is why I believe our solutions must go beyond temporary relief. Hindi po dapat band-aid solutions. No? Alam na po natin itong crisis na to ay aabot at least 3 months. No? O baka magpapatuloy pa. Fuel subsidies, makakatulong po, but they are not enough. No? 2 to 3 days, napakikinabangan po namin yan, pero tuloy-tuloy po yung problema po natin. What we need is expanded service contracting, a system where the government supports transport workers to provide reliable and affordable service. For me, this is not just assistance, it is recognition that what we do is essential public service. Pinapahalagaan sana yung ginagawa po ng mga tsuper, no? Ang dami namin sinasacrifice. Kami po nagbibigay ng discount sa mga senior, kami rin nagbibigay ng discount sa mga person with disability, kami rin po nagbibigay ng discount sa mga estudyante. Saan po namin binabawi yun? Pero yung malalaking korporasyon, alam niyo naman po, no? Kinacharge po nila sa mga taxes nila yan. I also believe in the need for equity subsidies and a just transition. If modernization is to happen, na nangyayari na po sa ibang bansa, sa atin ay nangangarap tayo, it must not leave us behind. It must create pathways for us to survive, adapt, and thrive, not push us out. Hindi po tayo dapat mawala doon sa modernization na to. In my view, meaningful representation means having leaders who understand that transport is not just a sector. It is a lifeline. Every decision about transport affects whether people can go to work, go to school, or access basic services. The party list system was created to give people like us a voice. But for me, reclaiming representation is not just about having seats in Congress, it is about using those seats to fight for real change. Marami na po kasi tatangka, no? Marami nang napaupo, pero hindi nga po natin nararamdaman na po yung kanilang itinutulak ay para sa kabutihan ng mga transport workers. Naupo na po yung nabanggit kanina, no? Yung mga one-utak, ngayon po nakaupo yung dumper, pero sa mga discussion tungkol sa mga transport issues, sa pagtaas ng krudo, sa mga ayuda na kailangan ng mga driver, hindi po natin sila halos hindi naririnig. No po? Kaya hindi ho sapat yun. Kailangan talaga ay nagagampanan. At I agree po sa ating mga kasama na dapat galing po talaga sa sektor yung naupo. Tiyakin po natin talaga. Kasi mostly kahit po yung ating mga secretaries, no, department secretaries, dapat sumasakay din ng MRT, sumasakay ng jeep para yung kanilang mga policy ay naaakma talaga doon sa pangangailangan ng mga mananakay at naakma doon sa karanasan mismo ng mga tsuper. No, madali po kasi mag-compute, no? Pero katulad nga po, kung hindi nararamdaman ng mga policy makers natin, yung mga karanasan na ito, ay maiiwan po rin po talaga yung mga vulnerable sector. Sabi nga po natin, gusto natin sa representation, na gusto natin, no? Ideally, leaders who come from the sector at dapat accountable siya doon. Hindi po siya yung nagbabankroll ng isang party list para mapaupo. No, marami po 'yan, nagtangka na po yung mga malalaking kumpanya ng bus. No, magtatayo ng party list, pero ang kanilang intention to protect their business. Hindi naman talaga manggagawa, no, yung mga nire-represent nila. At marami po tayo mga masasabing mga mga examples. Policy shaped through genuine consultation. Yun nga po, no, sa karanasan po namin. Ang dami po naming mga proposals, no? Like service contracting, gusto po natin mag-modernize. Pinapakita na po sa ibang bansa yung mga model para mapalitan po itong ating business model. Pero ang nakikita po natin ay totoo po, no? Hindi pinagplanuhan ang modernization. Wala pong pag-aaral, no? Kaya tinatanong magkano budget kailangan, hindi masagot ng DOTR. Kasi yun nga po, no, kami ay hindi na konsulta mabuti rito para itong mga proposals na to ay na may mainstream sa kanila na pag-aaralan din po nila kasi model nga po ito eh. Programs that protect our livelihood and provide social protection. Kasama din po yan. Yung long-term vision where mobility is treated as a right, not a privilege. Kadalasan po yung mass movement, yung mga manggagawa po kasama po sa pagunlad. Actually po, marami na kaming tinutulong sa gobyerno sa pamamagitan ng pagpapaliwanag at pagpapalakas ng mga karapatan ng mga manggagawa. Ang dami na po naming tinitiis. Kailan pa ho kikilos ang gobyerno? Kailan po mainstream ang mga issues na to na tunay na nagre-represent sa amin ang nagsasalita sa Congress, nagsasalita sa Senado. Yan po yung ating mga sitwasyon ngayon. Because of the end of the day, I measure representation not by what is said in Congress, but by what is felt on the grounds. Kaya iba po yung nangyayari sa mga sinasabi, pero iba po yung tunay na nangyayari on the ground. Hindi po natin nakikita yan. Can I earn enough to live with dignity? Can commuters rely on the safe and affordable transport? Ang mga policies ba ito ay naglilingkod sa marami o dahil lang sa mga ilan? If the answer is no, then for me, representation is still lacking. That is why I say this clearly. We must reclaim representation. Reclaim it from tokenism, reclaim it from elite interest, and bring it back to the people it was meant to serve. Because only then can we build a system that truly reflects our life, our struggles, and our aspiration as Filipinos. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aguilar. And thank you to all our speakers for those compelling opening statements. From your perspectives of legal, civic, and sectoral standpoints, we see how political representation sits at the intersection of competing interpretations. I would like to delve further on your reflections and frame our discussion within the system in place, and begin by asking whether the party list system has fulfilled its original intention of institutionalizing proportional representation for the marginalized, or if it has diverged from its purpose. For efficiency, I will direct questions to a specific panelist, but I warmly invite others to contribute should they see fit, as these issues are deeply interconnected. So let us begin. To Professor Tigno, building on your earlier discussion on electoral systems and party dynamics, we now move to the question of how institutional design translates into political outcomes. In your view, what structural features of the system may have contributed to unintended outcomes such as elite capture, concentration of political power, or the reinforcement of dynastic influence?
Okay. Thank you, Comsec Dana, for that question. For yung presentation ko kanina essentially brings that that point to bear, no, the idea of what sort of structural flaws, no, does our party list system have, and na-identify ko naman yon, at least 3. And I think that's the those are the main points that I would like to reiterate now, no, in response to the question. But I think yung isa pang, although hindi na natalakay sa presentation ko, the other problem I think that we need to, or challenge that I think we need to confront, no, has to do with convincing our legislators that there is a problem. Kasi right now, I don't think they see it that way. No? They see the structural challenges or difficulties in the first place as problems. No? So baka kailangan pa natin ng konting pag-uusap sa kanila. No? And parang it's reasonable to arrive at that conclusion kasi this is what got them elected in the first place, no? So from their point of view, since nandiyan na sila sa kanilang posisyon sa Kongreso, this is what works for me, and so if it works, there's no problem, diba? Ang challenge para sa atin, especially those who are working in the House, is to parang give a new perspective to things, because I'm not sure if the people in the House see things the way the larger public would see this party list system as an issue. Maybe a few see this, especially in the Senate, no? Pero sa House kasi mahirap ipamukha, no? Ipahiwatig yung problema, no? Because they're the first ones that benefited from this arrangement, no? Whereas in the Senate, that's why I think it was Senator Padilla who came out with a statement saying that there's so many things wrong with the party list system. Why don't we just abolish it altogether? No? Parang, so nakikita sa Senado na may problema, but I'm not sure the House is able to see the problem as a problem. No? If anything, baka iba yung pagtingin niya sa problema no? ng party list system about how it's been steered away from the original intent no? of the framers of the Constitution and the spirit behind the party list law. No? Parang nawala na yun. Giving voice to the voiceless, protecting the minority. No? And so we need to, I mean, if you think about it, the reason why they put a cap, the 3-seat cap, no? Understandable din dun sa mga gumawa ng batas na yun. No? The reason why they put the 3-seat cap there is because they don't want to discourage the small groups, no? The groups that don't have the influence, the resources yet to compete against the more established mainstream parties. No? They want to give them a chance. No? But I think after so many years of implementation of the party list law, I think it's about time we do a overhaul siguro, a revision of that. Yun lang. Thank you.
Yes, Attorney Rivera.
I think the structural problem really is the lack of legislative changes. It's been 31 years since the initial law was created, and given that there was a lot of jurisprudential pronouncements, and more prominently yung atong paglaom. In the atong paglaom case kasi, I think na-frame yung conversation na proportional representation. So with the assumption na strong enough na yung sectors natin, ang sinasabi nung case na yon, even if there are farmers, proportional representation pa rin yung bantayan. So if walang ma-elect na farmers, assuming they're already strong, it just means they don't represent enough of a proportion to obtain a seat. But I think we have to reframe that conclusion in the fact that there's still congressional plenary power, which can initiate affirmative action and which can implement a party list system that does not rely purely on proportional representation but also social justice. So kapag may ganun kasi may representation, dun sa atong paglaom case din na introduce na advocates, yung pwedeng advocates ang nominees. And if you look at the word representation, napaka-clear naman na dapat yung galing mismo sa sector. I want to disabuse ourselves of the idea na there has to be an expert or a more learned person to represent the farmers, the laborers, the fisher folks. No, I think the best people to articulate their own concerns would be people coming from the sector. So naging defined na yung party list system natin ng jurisprudence because there was a lack of a subsequent law. So rather than it being defined by cases, siguro talaga po mas maganda na i-overhaul through legislative action para hindi piecemeal din po yung changes.
Thank you, Attorney Rivera. Thank you, Professor Tina. Yes, sir, Mr. Aguilar.
Talagang para sa amin napaka-problematic nitong party list system natin yung kasi halimbawa po, yung binanggit natin kanina, DOTR yung ka-engage namin. Marami po kaming idea para solusyonan itong mga problema sa public transport. Pero dahil wala po nagre-represent sa Congress, no, parang pakikinggan lang kami pero hindi nangyayari talaga dapat yung mga action point na dapat ginagawa. At the end of the day, yung agency mas nakikinig sa mga mamabatas. Now, which is kung meron tayong representation talaga sa Congress, at least na may mainstream yung pag-uusap. Nakikinig kasi ang mga agency sa Congress. Kaya napaka-importante ng representation. Ang tanong ko lang ay, alam natin, very uphill battle itong ano natin, itong gusto nating gawin. Siyempre parang anti-dynasty yan, parang iwa-water down din yan. Baka may ilang pagbabago pero hindi katulad nung gusto nating mangyari. Pero kung titingnan po natin, mahalaga talaga na isulong pa rin siya kasi para na-challenge talaga yung ano nila, no, yung kapangyarihan ng pinasok na yung space ng party list system na importante to na ma-define na rin siguro natin anong sector talaga ang dapat pumapasok. Ma-define doon sa amendments. Kasi pagka binigyan mo ng konting puwang talaga, no, yung mga pwedeng pagsamantalan, doon pa nga lang po sa tinatawag nating implementing rules and regulation, natutwist na yung batas natin. No? Marami pong ganyang mga examples, no? Maganda po yung diwa ng batas, pero nung nagawa na, yung implementing rules and regulation, nadidefeat na nito yung, yung purpose ng batas. Kaya yun po yung kailangan nating talagang pagsikapan na, ma-address.
Thank you, Sir Jaime. Thank you, Attorney Tonet, Professor George. Yes.
Kasi pag pinag-usapan natin ang party list, I think we need to clarify, no, ano ang kahulugan ng isang partido, no? Ano ba ang kinakatawan ng isang partido versus a sector or a trade union, no? And when we think of a party in the party list, ang partido ay kumakatawan hindi lamang sa kanyang mga miyembro mismo or even sa kanyang particular na sektor, kung hindi ang kinakatawan niya isang set ng programa na ipinatutupad sa buong bansa at hindi lamang sa isang espesipikong sektor. No? So with that, I think we may need to, when revising the party list law, baka kailangan magkaroon tayo ng pagkaklaro, no, kung sa terminolohiya, no. Pag sinabing partido, kasi ngayon anyone can form a party, no, but in reality hindi naman talaga totoong partido kung hindi sektor lamang, kung minsan nga slogan lamang, no, na walang kahulugan sa programa. So we might have to include not just a party list, no, a party list, but a sector list na maaaring kumatawan sa mga partikular na sektor. Yun lang. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we want to hear from Attorney Ryan, and I would like to extend this question to Sir Jaime as well. With the focus on the role of civil society organizations and legal advocacy groups in strengthening democratic participation and electoral integrity in the Philippines, Attorney Ryan, my question for you is, how do CSOs today contribute or fail to deepen democratic participation and representation in the Philippines? And in your experience, what structural or cultural barriers continue to limit the development of a truly programmatic and inclusive electoral system?
Siguro yung sa base lang sa, well, when we try to improve the democratic system, no, what usually happens, I mean, mga CSOs, ganyan, no, is they translate the policy. Policy not necessarily yung, for example, pag polisiya or isang programa na tinatranslate sa local context without taking into account the local context. So now, what happens is that the program, nawawalan siya ng isang anchor sa tao. No? I mean, of course, this is very theoretical. No? Pero if something doesn't mean, if it's not relatable to the Filipino, then it's very hard na mabigyan siya ng kahulugan on a personal level. Now, when you're talking about cultural problems, no, ang napansin ho namin kasi sa lente is pag yung mga interactions namin with the voters when it comes to programs, when we did our research, is that a lot of the voters, yung hindi rin may hindi mature, no? Siguro yun lang yung sabihin natin. Hindi ganun ka-mature ang Filipino electorate. And one very sinabi ko kanina, one very prominent manifestation of that is the exercise of democracy is limited to the voting. And then after we vote, wala na. Yun na yun. Takot na tayo to hold people into account, which is fundamental in a democracy. No? So, maglalabas tayo ng sama na loob, pero hindi natin ma-assert yun. Of course, may counterpart din yun, no? Kasi we can say that where are the mechanisms, no, which make this assertion of rights, assertion of accountability, are they even accessible? No? Pero at the same time, if you're talking about culture, talking about the people, then it's something that needs to be addressed as well. Okay? So, ang lagi kong sinasabi, yung maraming reforms, policy, okay yun. Pero yung kultura which implements that policy, nasan yung reforma natin doon? No? Nasan yung, for example, civic or political education? Does the Filipino, alam ba nila yung kahalagahan nung separation of powers and checks and balances? Yun. And of course, it need not be formalized into schools. No, can be media, other forms of translating it to inform and educate people. Yun lang.
Thank you. Yes, Sir Jaime. How do CSOs today contribute or fail to deepen democratic participation and representation in the Philippines? And in your experience, what structural or cultural barriers continue to limit the development of a truly programmatic and inclusive electoral system?
Sa tingin ko pa rin, yung fragmentation ng labor, isa pa rin malaking issue natin yan. Kaya mahina yung ating tulak, no, ng mga policy reform, yung mga tinutulak natin mga batas. Particular sa amin, sa transport nga, makikita natin sa strike lang, no, mag-uusap-usap kami. Pagkatapos biglang kakausapin yung iba ng LTFRB, papangakuan yung kanilang mga personal interest. Maraming false representation katulad ng binabanggit. Hindi lang naman sa party list party list system natin. Including yung mga organization. Ito yung nagpapahina doon sa gusto nating mangyari ng mga reforma, no? Yung mga maiingay, yun yung laging naririnig sa media, pero tayo na tumutulong, no, yung mga konkretong ginagawa natin, mga research, paano susolusyonan tong krisis na to, marami na tayong naibigay. Ngayon, dadamputin na lamang ng iba to at i-mainstream din nila. Pero sa dulo ay hindi naman yung para sa kabuuan na katulad ng sinasabi na sir, no? Yung representation kasi para sa kabuuan dapat Hindi lang yung ginagawa mo ay para dun sa sarili mo lang. Tulad po ng ginagawa natin sa transport, yung mga policy natin, included po dyan yung mga mananakay, no? Napaka-importante sa atin na may masasakyan yung mga manggagawa. Hindi rin po tayo nagpa-file ng mga fare increases, no? Kaya makikita natin na yung ibang grupo magpa-file pero kami po ay nagde-demand sa government interventions. Lalong-lalo na tinulak po nila itong modernization na to. Guguho, no? Bagsak na po yung mga transport co-op. Nagbibigay na po tayo ng mga solutions na pwede na lang pag-usapan. Awa po ng Diyos, narinig na po namin ng DOTR ngayon, yung service contracting LGU-led, na sa ibang bansa kasi mga local government, ang katayap po, no? Mga service provider natin sa transport, very effective po. No? Merong kasing kakayahan yung mga key cities natin, yung mga malalaki, lalo yung mga IRA, to provide. Nakita po natin ng Quezon City, No, ang magandang practices na po yan, nasisimula para maging sustainable yung ating transport. Pero hindi po pwede na parang ang mangyayari, puro ayuda lang yung ginagawa eh. Kaya po tayo, dapat ang ginagawa nga po natin ay tumutulong tayo sa sektor at sa gobyerno. In between, win-win solution. Pati po yung ating mga mananakay. Kaya pati po yung mga manggagawa. Kasi every time na kami po magdadagdag ng pamasahe, sigurado hihingi ng dagdag sahod ang mga manggagawa. Kasi ang karugtong po niyan ay pagtaas ng bilihin. Alam na alam po namin yan. Nasa sektor po kami ng mga manggagawa. Kaya tayo rin po ang masasaktan doon sa gagawin natin. Kaya ang dami pong pera ng gobyerno na kung saan lang napupunta. Alam niyo na, nangyari, di po ba? Billion ang mga nalulustay. Pero dito sa simpleng programa na pwede nating ilagay yung budget para to mitigate yung issue natin ay hindi po nangyayari. Kaya talagang hindi po maganda yung nangyayari sa atin eh. Pagdating sa problema, sa mitigation, binabarat tayo. No? Ng mga politiko na to, yung katulad ng sinasabi ni Sir, yung mga congressman natin, party list man yan o mga district congressman, hindi na pa-prioritize yung issue natin na parang wala tayong crisis ngayon. Dumating po yung panahon, wala na pong masakyan, wala na pong mga manggagawang pupunta ng pabrika kasi bagsak na po yung transport system natin.
Thank you, Sir Jaime. Okay po, we proceed with a health break. Thank you, Mr. Aguilar, and the rest of our resource person for your insightful responses. Even with this initial exchange, we already see that representation in the party list system is not singular or linear. It operates across multiple layers, electoral mechanisms that determine access to power, institutional design that defines rules of inclusion and exclusion, and sectoral claims that assert who speaks for whom in a fragmented democratic space. Taken together, these layers reveal both the promise and the tension of the Philippine party list system, a system designed for inclusion, yet continuously contested in practice. So now, before we transition to the next segment, which is the open forum, we'll take a short health break. Thank you.
A few quick reminders for the open forum. For our Facebook Live audience, please post your questions in the comments section. For those on-site or watching via Zoom, you may scan the QR code provided earlier to submit your questions. Thank you.
na sila eh. Tingnan po ninyo, yung isa, Vice Governor, yung isa, District Congressman, yung isa, party list. Yung nanay, mayor, ang kapatid pala, mayor. Nag-extend na kami sa party list. Yung mga gobernador, ganyan din po ginagawa. Titiyakin talaga na dapat ay merong representation ng bawat sektor. Kung pupunuan mo rin lang, lalagyan mo na lima sa labor, ganun mo na siya. Mandated na. Pero kung di sila bilong doon sa bawat kasi 60 yan. Sector yun.
May we call on all participants to kindly take your seats.
Sinapsi kasi, napakadami na rin sector. Sinamang kami lang yung children. Lumampas pa sa youth. Oo.
Reminders for open forum. So now before we transition to the next segment, which is the open forum, a few quick reminders. For our Facebook Live audience, please post your questions in the comment section. For those on site or watching via Zoom, you may scan the QR code provided earlier to submit your questions. We now open the floor for questions from our audience. For participants here in Mahogany Grand Ballroom, feel free to raise your hand if you wish to speak. Once acknowledged, please introduce yourself with your name and institution, then proceed with your question. I'll begin by reading the first two questions submitted via our online form. Okay. The question is for Professor Tino. What are the benchmarks, parameters upon which we can quantitatively or qualitatively measure an effective political party list system?
Okay. Siguro walang ano yan, walang standard metric, walang absolute metric for success, no? Or indicator of success. Ang masasabi ko lang, kasi nga, I mean, each country case will have its own limitations, no? Or challenges. Pero ang standard metric talaga for an effective party list system is that it should convey a genuine sense of proportionality. Proportionality, kailangan walang cap, no, na hanggang 3 lang regardless of the number of votes that you receive. Yun, no? Pangalawa, there should be a threshold, no? At yung threshold na ito ay hindi lamang mababa na kahit sino pwede nang mag-set up ng kanyang party list at pakilahok. Kung hindi, dapat reasonable, nakikita natin sa ibang bansa, mga 5% nga ang threshold. Okay? Ours is 2%. Ngayon, effectively, wala na nga yung threshold na yun. No? Sa ibang bansa naman, na walang minimum threshold, wala rin silang cap as to the number of proportional seats that you can get. No? So, in other words, pwedeng kalahati ng parliament sa iyo, no? As long as you got 50%. Pwede ring maliit na maliit, enough for just one seat. No? So, walang prescribed limits whether at the bottom or at the top. So, yun ang masasabi ko sa nagtanong.
Thank you, Professor Tigno. Also for you po, sir. Next question. Given the weakness of party list system, would it be a better policy reform to just strengthen the political party system instead? This reform would address the issues of fragmentation, weak representation, lack of accountability under the current party system. Shifting to more established and mature political party system would be a better fit for any campaign finance and anti-dynasty reforms. What are your thoughts on this, and would you say that this should be a more priority measure than the anti-dynasty measure?
Okay, kanina bago nag-convene yung meeting, nag-uusap-usap din kami kanina with some people some participants, no? And talagang mahirap kasing sabihin na dito ka dapat magsimula or ano, because the problem is really complex and interrelated, no? And it's prone to lead to unintended consequences, no? Gusto mo sanang mangyari ito. Gusto mo sanang bigyan ng pagkakataon na yung mga maliliit na partido makilahok, no? So that's why you impose a 3-seat cap o kaya ay 2% na lang, no, instead of the usual 5% share of votes, no? Pero as a consequence, pinadadali mo lang sa kahit na sinong tao na meron siyang pamilya, may koneksyon, kontrolado niya ang isang probinsya or whatever, na manghimasok, no, sa ganitong larangan, no? My take on institutional reform is look at it from a structural point of view and approach it from there. Kasi nga, as I said kanina nga, yung sa struktura pa lang ng party list law, kita na natin na kung nasaan yung problema, no? And by addressing this structural infirmity in the law, party list law, we hope that it can lead to, halimbawa, pag tinanggal niya yung 3-seat cap, of course, parties are going to compete for the highest number of votes, highest share of votes. Kokonti lang siguro ang mga political families or dynasties na may kakayanan na, makakuha ng ganong kadaming boto, no? In other words, you're giving now space for the political parties themselves to take over rather than have just any individual, no, organize a party and that's it. Tapos pagka tinaasan mo yung threshold naman to, let's say, 5%, then hindi na pwede ang kahit na sino lamang, no, na makapasok dito, no, with maybe with limited resources, no. Again, binibigyan mo ng kakayanan yung mga organisasyon na meron ng sapat na kakayanan, no, na ihayag ang kanilang programa, no, and to organize themselves or consolidate themselves, no? Kasi right now, with the cap and the threshold, loose threshold, fragmented ang ating, kaya nga you have more than 100, no? Kung titignan natin from a democratic perspective, maganda yon. Pero parang sobra yatang dami, no, ang mga organisasyong ganitong lumalabas na to the point that you're actually, ironically, limiting the choices of your voters. because not everyone can really go through all 150 in the list, no? And evaluate. And ideally also, I mean, voters choose the party that they are most aligned with in terms of the program, the party, and the sector, no? Pero sa dami ng mga pinagpipilian natin, I don't think voters can make sensible choices, no? A sensible choice as to what party list they would like to have as their representative in the House.
Yes, Attorney Rosette.
I think it should be separate. Kasi mahalaga yung sectoral aspect ng party list. Eh. So kung unahin, of course yung political party is a different reform. But insofar as, and that cover, the interests of the sector as well. But it's important insofar as policy reform, yung nabigyang boses, specifically yung mga sektor, yung marginalized. Kasi kung lalamunin lang sila nung isang malaking reforma, eh mawawalan din sila ng boses. No? So in a sense, what will happen is, kung ano yung nangyari sa party list ngayon, na nawawalan ng boses yung marginalized sector.
From a practical perspective naman po, and this is not an invitation for people to register, between registering as a political party versus a sectoral party, it's actually easier to register as a political party because the parameter is a shared ideology. So pagdating po sa registration, the only thing that they need to prove with COMELEC is that there is an existing ideology in the form of yung mga party papers nila, declaration of principles. Whereas, kung sectoral organization or sectoral party, they have to prove that majority of their members actually belong to the sector. In that sense, there's more incentive for more political parties to register as party lists. And in the numbers I gave you po kanina, of the 195 currently listed party lists, over 40% of that belongs to the political party. So, kapag tinanggal po natin yung sectoral in favor of the political party, and even with the current setup, the major political parties nga po is not even strong din, diba? So, how more can we expect yung political party lists to be stronger? So, I think that it will dilute the voices of the sectors even more. At the same time, it will also increase the number of political parties na, since they're not asked to prove that people actually believe in that ideology, kasi list of names lang naman nandun, mas madali po for those with bigger or more resources to just form party lists to entrench themselves in the party list system.
Thank you. We have a question from the floor. From Mr. Save Gregorio of the Senate. Sir, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon po. Save Gregorio po from the Senate. I would like to preface the question muna na I think what we collectively are always forgetting, or usually forgetting about when we talk about electoral reforms, is human behavior. And instinctively, as humans, we have grown to more than 8 billion people in the world because we have a strong instinct for self-preservation. And that same instinct is what informs our policies and our legislation, which is why a lot of these are, I don't want to say a lot of these, but rather many of these are rather not evidence-based, but emotions-based and interest-based. So my question is, and I know for a fact that this is a difficult question because this has been raised over and over again, but has been swept under the rug, maybe because it's, again, a very difficult question. But the question is, how do we convince our policymakers, our legislators, to legislate against themselves? Like, for example, here in the party list system, would we be able to convince the 20% in the House to write themselves out of office? And even in the political dynasty system, political dynasty bills, how do we convince members of political dynasties to disqualify themselves from office? Thank you.
That question is for Attorney Ryan J.
Attorney Rosette. Thank you.
Such a difficult question, no? If I know the answer, matagal ko nang sinabi yan sa ano. I mean, it's a difficult question, no? What I would say is that, you know, when you're talking about people in power, especially people in Congress, they actually engage in vote-seeking behavior. Because they want to, you know, yung entrench nila yung existing power nila yung existing position. So, if there was a way to make them realize that if you engage in this, matatanggal ka sa pwesto, I think that's the only way, no, na for them to actually legislate against themselves. But you are going against several layers of structural problems, no? Yung patronage system, yung sistema kung saan yung mga tao parang halimbawa pag malapit na yung botohan, malapit na yung election, they receive a lot of tulong, no? Social welfare. This is even before the election period, no? Kakaroon sila ng kumbaga na-politicize yung mga programa. And then, for the voters, what they realize or what they think is that, you know, ito lang yung tulong na natatanggap namin every 3 years. No? So, parang sa kaila tulong, kaya, natulungan ako, iboboto ko to. No? Pero actually, teka, yung tulong na yun, binibigay mo yun dapat every time. Every year. It's something that should be regular. No? Another example of a very politicized, no, structural problem is, for example, to be able to avail of the benefits, no. So, for example, sa local government unit, is yung aspeto nung you need to be a registered voter, no. But the funding actually, when you take a look at the local government code, wala naman nakalagay na yung funding ng local government unit ay nakabase kung registered voter ka. So now, people now become more vulnerable. Teka, kailangan ako magrehistro at bukod doon ay to be able to avail, no, I need to be very close to the people in power. So you are going against that system, no? And again, what I would say is that democracy takes time. It's a long process, but and it's a process that everyone should work on. No? It's a project that everyone should work on. And again, babalik ako dun sa sagot na if we can make them realize na if you don't legislate on these things, then you will lose your position. But it's a greater penalty for them if they don't legislate on these things. That's the general response ko dun sa tanong. Yun, baka may dagdag yun.
Yes, Sir Ryan.
Ito yung pinag-uusapan namin kanina ni Prof, no? Kasi maganda naman yung nakalagay sa ating Constitution, no? Yung framework ng Constitution natin malinaw. Yung vision niya. Problema natin sa mga legislators na naging legislators natin, reactive tayo. Andito na tayo sa crisis na mahirap sagutin na yung tanong mo. Kasi ang magdidesisyon niya, sila na eh. Di ba? Na rampant na yung political dynasty, tapos nag-extend sa party list. In due respect sa COMELEC, no, marami kami naririnig na madaling mag-rehistro, fly-by-night na party list, basta may pera. No? Parang ang nangyayari, hindi naman talaga siya sectoral rep eh. No, yung nagre-represent, meron dyan, nagre-represent ng Guardia, Arroyo, Apelido. Di ba? Doon pa lang parang hindi na siya align. Pero ba't nakakalusot yung registration? Tapos marami pang iba, no, mga multimillionaire ang nagre-represent sa sector. Baka isang pwede nga natin gawin. And sabi mo nga, baka napaka-uphill nitong labanan na to. Kasi dapat ang nagre-represent, baka kailangan merong below 1 million ang salin o yung kinikita. Kasi vulnerable sector yung pinag-uusapan natin dito para i-represent yung sector. Pero kung milyonaryo yung nagre-represent, di ba parang naku-question yung tunay na representation. Kasi kaya nga representation, di ba, dapat nararamdaman niya yung issue nung nire-represent niya ng mga vulnerable sector. Kaya parang ang hirap unawain niya yun, bakit ang tatalino ng gumawa ng ating konstitusyon, bakit hindi nagawa ng enabling law nung panahong hindi pa rampant itong problemang ito. No? Yun po yung problema.
Not to sound defensive, sir, I just want to siguro add to that, yung sa ease or difficulty of registration, ito po yung reality niya. Noong 2025 elections, there were 190 petitions to register as a party list. The COMELEC only approved 47. Kasi po, at least the current composition of the commission has been actively trying to filter talaga yung party list. But this is the challenge. Yung law po kasi, the COMELEC can only implement the law, and that includes jurisprudence. So depende kung gaano kalax or kahigpit yung prescribed ng batas, yun lang po yung pwedeng i-implement ng COMELEC. So for instance, yung isang criticism, hindi naman, bakit ito bigla yung nominee? Parang galing to sa political family. Because of the atong paglaom case, hindi naman po kami pwedeng mag-require na ang nominee na nung mga sektor, sabihin natin sektor ng urban poor, sektor ng transport, ay membro ng sektor. Kasi inopen na nga po sa advocate. And honestly, anyone can claim to be an advocate. They can say, I empathize with the cause. I have some plans that I think can address the concerns. So in that way, we cannot limit the nominees attached to a specific party list. At the same time, valid po talaga yung ganong criticism, and I think it's high time that we address that by limiting the nominees. And tama rin po yung sinasabi nila, kami po sa COMELEC, ang ano po natin, sectoral party, kapag sinabing sectoral party, it means one of the 8 sectors po dun sa Constitution, di ba? Yung farmers, laborers, etc. Kapag sectoral organization, catch-all po yun. Sino? So, every conceivable group with a shared interest po. So, kahit i-represent nila, biroan nga po to sa amin, baka next time may mag-register, sector ng mga tambay, sector ng mga, wala kasi they don't have to be marginalized. They just have to represent the same interest. They have to have some shared identity. So I agree, there are limitations because of the law and jurisprudence. The COMELEC is trying actively to limit. And isa pa pong problem nga na sinasabi kanina, sinabi ko na rin, pahaba po ng pahaba yung listahan namin kasi hindi kami makapag-delist. Dahil ang gagawin lang ng party, pag natalo ko ngayon, hindi po kailangan mag-rename. Talo ko ngayon. Next election, ako tatakbo. The election after, tatakbo ulit ako. So, we have party lists na 15 years, 18 years na, every 6 years nasa balota sila. Never once na mananalo. But the COMELEC is limited and restricted from canceling the registration because of the PGBI case. So, there are a lot of restrictions po that really have to be addressed by legislation.
Okay, thank you to our dear panelists. Okay, next we have another question from the floor from Mr. Gilbert Lumantao.
Hi, Gilbert Lumanta from the AP Search. Gusto ko lang pursue yung aspect ng how do we pursue the reform, no? So I think kanina si attorney from COMELEC mentioned that there are some bills pending and siguro magandang i-elaborate kung what are the features there, what are ano na yung mga nire-recommend, no? And I'm also curious, considering the circumstance, if yun nga, we can foresee na the reform can progress first at the Senate rather than the House.
I think Senator Attorney Dana can correct me kasi siya po yung COMSEC sa Central Committee on Electoral Reforms. Pero by our latest count, there are almost 20 pending bills or mga ganyan, more than 10 pending bills po sa Senate na addressing the party list reform. And to answer the earlier question and the current question from the Commission's end, at least from Chairman Garcia's mind, one way to advocate talaga is to put the pressure on the legislators. That's why si Chairman Garcia, nagpasulat siya ng complete version of the bill, incorporating all of the good points from the various bills ng mga senators, kasi meron pa tayong version from Senator Bam, Senator Revilla, Senator Amy, Senator Ontiveros. Ginawa namin, kinonsolidate namin lahat ng mga common points into one bill. So that puts the pressure on the legislation. There is a ready bill for you to actually author. So ginagawa po ni Chair, ina-announce niya pa yan sa public, para hindi sabihin na mahabang usapan pa, because there are things that we can do at this point. There are measures that we can adopt. Yung common features po ng mga bills sa Senate ay una, they want to remove yung substitution ng nominees. Isa po yan na almost across all Senate bills is present. Kasi ang nangyayari daw po, kunyari, before elections, 5 nominees ng party list, sabihin natin transport, lahat nung nasa 5 na yun, talagang driver or operator, talagang entrenched doon sa sector. Tapos magugulat na lang yung mga publiko na bumoto doon, gustong tulungan yung transport sector. Kahit ako hindi transport sector, binoto ko sila kasi thinking na si Sir yung uupo. Pagdating na nung mismong confirmation, yung mag-take na sila ng oath, biglang yung nakita nilang nominee, iba na pala, dating congressman, yun na, apparently nag-substitute ng nominees. So all of the bills po sa Senate try to address that. Dapat kung sino yung nominee na binanggit before the elections, during the campaign, yun yung talagang upo. Kasi kung ang gusto ng mga tao ay yung sectoral na galing sa sector, yun talaga yung upo. That's one common feature which we also support. Second, there's also a feature there po. Common din po to. 80% of the bills contain this. Meron po doon na dapat authorized ang commission to refuse or refuse the name of a party list or to compel them to change. Kasi may proliferation daw po ng paggamit ng names or ng acronyms that are attributable to government programs. Ngayon po kasi wala kaming talagang power to really tell you, ibahin mo yung name mo. So, a common feature of the bills po will allow us to tell you, kapag similarly named yan sa government program, bawal mo yan gamitin. So, and then the others po are common to what we said. Yung iba po nag-advocate din ng particular sectors. Yung version po ng COMELEC, meron po kaming 14 sectors na dapat may seats lagi. Ang maganda po doon, ngayon po kasi nirarank natin lahat eh. So whether political or sectoral. So kunyari, 60 lang. Ang mga farmers, sabi natin there are 10 party list na farmers. None of those 10 actually make it to the top 60. Wala na po ever na participate. So dito po sa sectoral na gugroup natin sa balota, ito mga farmers, pili ka ng isa dyan. Ito mga fisher. May pre-identified sectors po kami. Meron din kaming sectors para sa all others na gusto mag-participate. And makikita nyo po ito sa Bangsamoro elections actually sa November. Magandang testing kasi may 5 sectors doon. Naka-per sector po yung kandidato. So yung mga tao, sure sila bawat sector represented. Thank you po.
And to answer Sir Gilbert's query on the status of the party list reform bills in the Senate, we already heard it. Currently, the committee report is being routed na po. So hopefully,
pagdating po ng session, ma-file na po natin. So, ano po, we are in high hopes that that the Senate will really work on this po. The committee, the committee is truly working hard for this po. I don't. That will be answered.
Sa commission po, hindi ko po alam kung nakapag-participate kami recently sa counterpart hearing dun sa counterpart committee naman po sa House of Representatives. So, yun po yung concern na sinasabi. Baka sa House, kahit malakas yung push dun sa Senate, baka less yung push sa House. Pero po dito po talaga ngayon pumapasok yung public, I don't want to say public shaming, public pressure culture, dito po talaga pumapasok. Kasi sa Senate, for instance, yung anti-political dynasty bill, even those who might be directly affected by the anti-political dynasty bill or law, dahil po may kapatid na senador or may kapatid na congressman, they also signed the committee report and the draft. So it's because pwede mong sabihin lahat kami nag-sign na, ito na lang yung mga hindi. So those senators would tend to also want to attach their causes dun sa napakagandang bill na yon. So I think similar kind of approach should also be made sa House of Reps.
And even two co-authors po ng anti-political dynasty bills, Senator J.V. Ejercito and Senator Erwin Tulfo po. So who have siblings also. So, in the Senate. So, yun po. Yes, Attorney Ross.
Magdagdag lang ako dun sa public shaming. I wouldn't call it shaming, public pressure. No, I think some countries, what they have adopted is a form of a monitoring. So, I mean, it could be a reform direction. Form of monitoring, who actually voted, what it's done, and who are the legislators involved, what's their position. So it's a way and something, kasi the information is available or can be, sabi natin, retrieved. But retrieval is different from ease of accessibility. So if there's something like that, no, na people can actually see and explain, that can actually add pressure on the part of the legislators. Yun lang.
Okay, we now move on to the next question from Ms. Geraldine Binadella from the House of Representatives. Any of the panelists may answer. Her question is, gaps have been discussed. What about its good points? Research called on the comments from other countries espousing their own party list systems.
Ako, I can identify a few good points naman sa party list system natin. Because of the experience sa party list system, it has inspired legislation even within the country. So for instance, the Bangsamoro Electoral Code, which is being implemented for the first time in the first Bangsamoro elections at the last quarter of the year po, yung ginawa nilang legislation is inspired by the gaps at the national level. So doon po sa Bangsamoro Electoral Code, for instance, there is a very clear anti-dynasty, political dynasty provision. There's also a very stringent process to ensure that nominees for sectoral representatives are members of the sector. May certifying agency pa po sila. Tapos they can be removed kapag hindi na nila na-represent yung sector. May mga ganong klaseng and it was only possible kasi nakita po kung ano yung gaps na meron tayo. Yung positive aspect naman po is maybe it's not working perfectly, but it's working in some form. So for instance po, if you noticed, sa most recent elections, the highest votes in the history of the party list system was obtained by a political party na party list based. Hindi po talaga sila normally nagpa-participate sa national level na political, representation. At the same time, they were able to gain, I think, the most number of votes even without a national level candidate. So that means hindi necessarily attached sa person yung naging campaign. It's really maybe nakakakita tayo ng public or the voters actually recognizing ideology. So I think that's a positive for our party list na meron tayo nakikitang mga ganong klaseng outcomes. At the same time, yung current conversation natin, the ongoing conversation, has inspired very good legislation po sa regional level naman.
Thank you. Yes, Professor.
Kanina pa ako nag-iisip kung ano yung ano yung magandang masasabi sa ating no? But I mean, right, no? You have a top performing party list that's really genuinely a party list, no? But again, I go back to the structural limitation. Can you imagine kung wala yung limit na yon? How much more seats this genuine party list would have received, would have gotten in the House. No? So, hindi tayo dapat makontento sa, ganung level lamang na 3 upuan. No? I mean, if they deserve more than 3, then they should get more than 3. At hindi lamang yung kung ano lang yung sinasabi sa kasalukuyang batas. And that speaks to also the issue of, you have so many sectoral groups competing against each other. In this kind of arrangement na may cap ka at may 2% or almost non-existent 2% threshold, parang all the, let's say, farmers groups, all 10 party list farmers groups are, instead of cooperating, consolidating, they're competing against each other for the extra, seat na dapat sana ay if all 10 were to work together in a truly proportional system, they would definitely get more than just 10 seats. Diba? Than if they were to work alone, separate from each other, chances are some of them will get 1 seat, others wala. So they will, ito yung calculus ng tawag namin prisoner's dilemma. Yung magko-cooperate ba ako o hindi, no? Under this existing arrangement, structurally, it doesn't pay to cooperate. Galit tayo. This is the reason why some party lists in the beginning had to split themselves up. Diba? Para makagain sila ng enough 3 seats, etc. for their coalition, for their alliance, no? Essentially, galit-galit tayo, no? At doon nga ako babalik pa rin doon sa structural problem about this, no? And going back to the question kanina, how do we initiate the reform? Nasabi ko na rin to kanina. Make our legislators see the problem. Okay, it should be their problem. And I think our friend from Lente here also said it, no? Kung hindi nila ginawa, kung hindi sila sumunod sa gusto nating gawin nila, then vote them out of office, no? So that way, it becomes their problem also. At hindi lamang problema na nakikita ng ng mga wala sa poder, no? Kasi right now, that's how it's seen, no? Those in power don't see it as a problem because it's what allowed them to be in power in the first place, no? So for them, there's no problem. Pero on the whole, problema siya talaga, no? And this is the reason why structural problems are harder to address. Mas madaling ma-address yung mga cosmetic problems, no? About labels and mechanisms, no? But the structural problems are harder to address.
Thank you, Professor Tingno. So, for our last question, We have a question from our online viewer. This is for Sir Jaime. From your experience in community organizing and policy lobbying, what are the most pressing challenges within the community that hinder the representation of your concerns?
Doon pa rin sa, siyempre yung capacity pa rin ng mga leaders natin. No? Lalong-lalo sa local. Masyadong nagiging centralized yung pagtingin ng mga kasama natin on the ground. So to the point na kailangan mo talagang bumaba at magpapaliwanag ka. Kasi marami talagang issue na parang cultural din siya na ang nangyayari, nag-aantay na lang sila ng mangyayari. At tulad nito, pag sinabi ng ating government na meron silang programa para sa ganito, di asahan na nila. Pero later on, nadidismaya rin sila. Kaya sa experience natin, kailangan talaga ng sabi nga natin, kung magre-represent ka, titiyakin natin na yung mga positions natin na ilalabi sa national government o sa Congress o sa legislative body, any legislative body ay nanggaling talaga on the ground. Kung nagkakaroon man ng mga tinatawag nating on the national level, nagkakaroon ng discussion, kailangan mo itong i-roll out sa baba para may constituents ka talaga na naiintindihan nila. Kasi anything na pinagtagumpayan sa national level at hindi mo yan naipaliwanag sa baba, ang nangyayari, ang pinapasalamatan nila, yung nag-i-implement. Tulad na lang na service contracting na pinaglaban po natin, tayo nakakaintindi niyan, naipasa, no? Naipasa yung Bayanihan 2, na-include yung yung service contracting at napagpatuloy hanggang 2024, pagdating ng 2024, 2025, 2026 na zero. Pero nung nag-implement po yung LTFRB, ang sabi po ng mga constituents natin ay salamat LTFRB. Kaya nagkakaroon ng ng parang disconnect. Kaya mahalaga talaga na yung ginagawa natin ay alam po ng ating mga constituents din. Kaya napaka-importante ng representation talaga na naiintindihan nila na hindi mangyayari ito kundi gawa din ng mga constituents natin na ito rin yung demand. Ito yung nakikitang solusyon on the ground. Kaya nga minsan, yan nga po yung mahirap, nagiging audience na lang din sila minsan. Bagamat sila ay stakeholder, may hina po yung ating pressure sa national government o sa mga legislator. Kasi parang, yun nga po, may tendency talaga na maging spectator sila. Kaya napaka-importante talaga na naipapaliwanag hanggang sa baba yung ating mga advocacies na to. Para lalakas po talaga yung mga tinatawag nating panawagan, tulad ng sinasabi natin, kung itong party list law ay gusto nating ma-reform, napaka-importante na ito ay ibababa rin namin. Kaya ganito sitwasyon natin. Kasi ito po yung ating kalagayan. Walang tunay na nagre-represent sa atin. Sometimes yung nagre-represent sa amin ngayon sa Congress, yung Akbayan Party List, ay nakukuha na nila yung aming positions. Hindi sila maglalabas ng anumang posisyon na hindi nanggagaling sa sektor. Yan naman po yung kagalingan ngayon doon sa mga relasyon ng sektor sa partido. Napaka-importante po niya, nagiging mouthpiece mo rin sila sa Congress at yung mga advocacy natin na hanggang ibaba ay napapataas po natin. Kaya napaka-importante po ng pinag-uusapan natin ito kasi napaka-importante na may mainstream talaga yung mga nakikita natin pwedeng solutions na pagkukunan ng mga funding kung meron talagang nagre-represent sa mga manggagawa.
Thank you, Sir Jaime. That concludes our Q&A session. Thank you to our panelists for your thoughtful engagement and to our audience for the insightful questions that allowed for the purposive discussion we had today. As we move toward closing this lecture, I would like to invite our speakers to share their brief final reflections and policy or reform-oriented recommendations, particularly in light of ongoing debates on the future of the party list system and broader electoral reforms in the Philippines. Let's begin with Professor George Tigno, followed by Attorney Maria Antoinette Rivera, then Attorney Ryan Rosette, and finally Mr. Jaime Aguilar.
Okay. Final message. I think this is, ulitin ko yung sinasabi ko sa mga estudyante ko. No? Pag pinag-usapan ng demokrasya, democracy has no autopilot switch. Okay? Hindi ito isang sistema ng gobyerno na iniiwan lamang ng mga mamamayan sa kanilang mga leader o kanilang kinatawan. No? Kailangan din natin na maging involved, maging hands-on sa mga namumuno sa atin, no? To make them accountable and to make them more or genuinely representative. So, yun lang ang mensahe ko.
Yes, Attorney Rivera.
For me, I think the discussion today only strengthens my position, hearing Sir Jaime, that the sectors must dictate who the nominees are. And speaking from a personal standpoint naman po, everyone here works in policy, and sometimes it can be frustrating how slow the progress can be in policy making. Sometimes we think it's insurmountable and it's not possible to pass the policies we need to pass. But I think we cannot move a mile without moving a few inches. So we must continue advocating for these reforms. Thank you.
Attorney Rosette.
The proposed reforms have na-discuss na naman, no? Siguro ang sasabihin ko lang is that I think for a lot of us meron tayong paguran, no? Meron tayong siguro napapagod na tayo doon sa sistema, no? But what I would like to say is that change happens incrementally rather than radically, no? So each of us, sinabi rin kanina ni Professor, no? Kailangan incrementally we participate in moving the needle forward in the right direction. And that's work for a change that is enduring. Yun lang, no?
Sir Jaime.
For me naman, ang lagi nating sinasabi ay huwag tayong mapagod lumaban. No? At sinasabi rin natin sa mga constituents natin, sa mga kapwa manggagawa natin, kailangan nating maningil sa mga legislators natin. Lalong-lalo na yung mga programa na dapat ay kiniklaim ng mga sectors. Hindi pwedeng mag-aantay lang tayo kung ano yung gagawin nila. No? Kailangan ay proactive tayo, nagre-research din ng mga manggagawa. Pagka kaya nating maupo tayo, andito po yung mga proposals namin, para hindi na tayo aabot doon sa karsada. No? Kaya meron namang rooms, no, na pwedeng gawin. At nakikita po namin ang agency, nakikita namin dati yung budget hearing, hindi importante sa amin. No? Parang sa matatalino lang yan, mga legislators lang yan. Pero nakita natin na yung budget hearing pala ay napaka-importante para sa mga manggagawa. Kasi kung hindi nalalagay ng mga agency yung mga budget na hinihingi natin pala, kaya ngayon ang nakikita natin ay may pagbabago na sa mga agency dahil lumalawak na tayo sa mapanglawak na proseso. No? Kaya napaka-importante ng representation na ito. Kita nyo, kami transport workers, pero pinili talaga namin sumasama sa ganitong discussion kasi napaka-importante po nito para sa mga katulad po namin. Thank you po.
Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for your invaluable insights and contributions. Today's discussion has brought into focus the key tensions within the party list system between genuine representation and access to power, between how the system is designed and how it actually operates, and between its democratic ideas and present realities. It reminds us that democratic institutions are not fixed structures. They are constantly formed, contested, and redefined by institutions, actors, and interests that operate within them. Let's give our speakers another well-deserved round of applause. We look forward to continuing this critical dialogue in future installments of the Thursday Talks. Thank you, everyone, and I now return the floor to our host, Anne.
Thank you, Attorney Dana, for guiding us through our insightful discussions and exchange of ideas. At this point, we have a short activity for our attendees, just so we can hear from you all one more time. For our on-site and Zoom participants, you may scan the QR code flashed on screen and also found on your program. For our viewers tuning in live via Facebook, you may use the comment section. We'd like for everyone to reflect on this afternoon's discussion and answer this question. If this were tomorrow's headline, what's your one-sentence takeaway on the lecture? We will give you a few moments to reflect, and as you submit your responses, the program team will be displaying them in real time on the screen. So again, our question is, if this were tomorrow's headline, what's your one sentence takeaway on the lecture? So let's take a look of some of your responses. So first, once considered as a solution, is now part of the problem. The party list system is a backdoor for political dynasty and must be overhauled. The party list system was designed to amplify underrepresented voices. It now requires urgent structural reforms. To correct distortions and restore its original democratic purpose. A significant push towards authentic representation. Reform the system. That change is incremental rather than radical. Amending and strengthening COMELEC and party list system is also a priority. So thank you very much for those responses. And now, to give her synthesis of today's discussion, may we now once again call on our moderator, Attorney Dana Alberto.
Thank you, Anne. So, the topic for this Civils Thursday Talks session is timely since party list reform is one of the priority measures approved by President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. during the 3rd Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council, or LEDAC, full meeting of the 20th Congress. Moreover, the Senate Committee on Electoral Reforms and People's Participation already conducted a public hearing on the party list reform bills and is currently in the process of finalizing the committee report for filing. Today's session seeks to address which reforms should be retained, changed, or removed, the capability, or lack thereof, of the current party list system in providing proportional and genuine representation, and the necessary steps towards a system that genuinely represents and favors the interests of the Filipino people. On the features of the law that resulted to elite capture, concentration of political power, or the reinforcement of dynastic influence, Professor Tigno mentioned that there are groups that are more on slogans but empty on platforms. Another point raised that I personally have been hearing since I just started my career in the Senate a little more than a decade ago is that most parties are candidate-centered or personality-centered. Thus, a party is created for the nominee and not the other way around. That's why he also posed the challenge of convincing legislators that there is a problem, because we do need to give voice to the voiceless. That is why during the public hearing of the Senate Committee last March 2, 2026, it was emphasized by the chairperson, Senator Risa Ontiveros, the question, paano natin protektahan ang integridad? She pointed out that concerns have been raised about dynastic substitution, government contractors, and entities that may not genuinely represent the sectors that they claim to be a part of or advocates of. Another question she focused on during the hearing is, anong mga standards ang masisiguro ang authenticity? One of the features being considered is the refusal or cancellation of the registration of the sectoral party list organization when majority of its members do not belong to the marginalized and underrepresented sector it seeks to represent. Also, nominees of a sectoral party list organization must belong to the marginalized and underrepresented sector to which their party belongs. An anti-dynasty provision in the party list reform bill has been a consistent public clamor, and in fact, the anti-political dynasty bill is also a LEDAC priority measure. Aside from this, another hot topic feature is the anti-conflict of interest provision, which prevents a person to be nominated if such person has had a beneficial interest in or has held contracts or subcontracts to supply the government with goods or services. On COMELEC's role, Attorney Rivera mentioned that they provided the Senate Committee with a proposed bill that we hope will finally address the gaps in the old law that jurisprudence had to fill up. The committee also certainly took this into consideration in finalizing its substitute bill for the Party List Reform Act. During the public hearing of the committee, COMELEC Chairman George Garcia stated that the COMELEC publishes in its website the accomplished forms of all nominees so they can be scrutinized. That is why he called on the voting public to make use of this, especially in 2028, in order to question and/or oppose those organizations or nominees who are not qualified to be accredited or nominated. The COMELEC likewise suggested that reforms should be made for a stricter party accreditation process and nominee substitution process. On the problems being encountered in the development of a truly programmatic and inclusive electoral system, Attorney Rosette mentioned that a lot of the voting public do not even know what the party list is for. So we definitely need to amp up voters' education. They just vote and that's it. So assertion of rights and accountability to hold wrongdoers is lacking. Sir Jaime also added that implementation of laws falls short. The implementation should be for the whole, but he raised the problem that only certain groups benefit. The committee definitely desires to introduce a new formula in computing a structural seat allocation as well as increasing the 3-seat cap. On whether existing mechanisms such as the party list system sufficiently reflect the realities of sectors, Mr. Aguilar mentioned that there is a transport crisis but they are remained unheard. He said representation should bring crucial and real change to everyday lives, but they still feel not consulted enough and decisions were made without them. Are we truly being represented today? He asked. Hearing this from Mr. Aguilar only makes me question whether the party list system really works for those in the grassroots who were the main intent beneficiaries of the party list system. He also added that agencies listen to Congress. So if real sectoral members are part of Congress, then agencies will be able to also listen to those sectors in crisis. Professor Tigno also raised the point of putting up a list of sectors that should be voted on. This feature is likewise being considered by the committee. And also, implementation should not be reactive. That is why representation is important. With the insights gained from our distinguished speakers and panelists, I hope that you may use this value-added knowledge to strengthen and support the party list reform bill as you assist your respective principals once the bill is up for debates. And please join me in praying that a genuine reform in the party list system becomes a law before the end of the 20th Congress. I will now close my synthesis with the statement of my committee chairperson, Senator Risa Ontiveros, during the public hearing of the Senate Committee on the Party List Reform. Ang mahalaga po, malinaw ang direksyon, malinaw ang pamantayan, at malinaw kung sino ang tunay na kinakatawan. So it is my ardent wish that the Party List Reform Act will be a new chapter in our democratic history, a 2.0 if you will, in order that the hooligans in the party list system will be weeded out. May we reclaim genuine representation that will be highly favorable to the Filipino people. Thank you very much.
For your synthesis of today's lecture. This has truly been an insightful afternoon. We've explored a complex and timely topic, unpacking the concept of representation at the institutional level, and examine nuances of the party list system through a rich exchange of ideas. Discussions like this remind us of the importance of continuously engaging with pressing issues, questioning assumptions, and refining our perspectives. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the expertise and generosity of our resource persons, who share their insights and help us probe in today's topic. We are also deeply grateful to our moderator for skillfully guiding today's discussion and ensuring that meaningful dialogue took place. With that, the Development Academy of the Philippines would like to present tokens of appreciation to our resource persons. May I call on stage Center for Governance Vice President, Ms. Imelda Caluen, Policy Research Office Director, Mr. Gilbert Lumantao, and CIBEL's Program Manager, Ms. Maria Zarina Crescia de Leon, to present our tokens. First, our session speaker, Professor George Tigno. Next, may we invite Attorney Maria Antoinette Rivera, Attorney Ryan J. Rosette, And of course, Mr. Jaime Aguilar. We also would like to present a token of appreciation to our moderator, Attorney Dana Alberto. May we now invite everyone for our group photo. Thank you once again to our resource persons. Let's give them another round of applause. As we close our first lecture of 2026, we extend our gratitude to our invited guests, civil scholars, our Zoom attendees, and our Facebook Live viewers for joining us throughout the session. A big thank you also to our colleagues at the Development Academy of the Philippines for their invaluable logistical support and for helping us reach a wider audience through social media cross-posting and email blasts. Finally, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to the Senate of the Philippines and House of Representatives for the invaluable assistance and support they have extended in making today's event possible. That concludes today's lecture. This has been Anne Fajardo from the EP. Thank you for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next Thursday Talk session on June 18. Thank you very much, and stay safe, everyone.